and it came from curiosity. It wasn't really like I know more than everybody else. I know a little bit more than a lot of other people who aren't from there, but not a lot. And if I'm going to spend my time researching something to write a piece about it, I'd like to learn about myself and where I come from. My music is not like a diary. I don't usually write about my direct life experiences, but I use projects as excuses to learn about things that really matter to me, like folk tales. Like I have these tomes, I'm gesturing to the bookcase above the monitor, of oral histories by Juan B. Rael. It's called like Tales of the Hispanic Southwest, And he spent decades in the mid 20th century just interviewing people, like, tell me your story. And he would write down, they're all in Spanish, from northern New Mexico and Colorado, just folk tales. And then those got transferred into Rodolfo Anaya's cuentos. He chose like a dozen of them and did his own version, his own take on them. And realizing that these folk tales are not solidified in the past, like they are actually really malleable, I could do my own take on Rodolfo Anaya's take of Juan B. Rael's transcription of an old wives' tale from 150 years ago that may actually take roots from some indigenous story or some colonist story from before that. We can't get all the information there, but being in conversation, being part of a lineage of conversation has been very interesting to me.
This is Music Maker with Tyler Kline, a podcast from Loose Leaf Transmissions. Hey everybody, and welcome back, or welcome for the first time if you're new here. My name is Tyler, and I'm a composer, a broadcaster, curator, producer. I wear a lot of different hats, but really it all comes down to I just love to make things. And on this show, I sit down with other creative people to talk about their work, their philosophies, what inspires them, and all the threads that shape them as artists and what they make. On this episode, I'm joined by composer Nicolás Lell Benavides. Nicolás is a 2024-25 Guggenheim Fellow whose work spans opera, chamber music, and orchestra. And he has collaborated with some of the leading names in the field, from Gustavo Dudamel and the LA Phil to Eighth Blackbird and countless others. His music draws deeply from regional memory and cultural storytelling, often rooted in New Mexico, where he grew up, and includes everything from cottonwoods and New Mexican Catholic folk figures to civil rights histories and family lore. In this conversation, Nicolás reflects on why curiosity, and not necessarily autobiography, drives his creative process. We talk about the power of listening, the challenge of revision, and how collaboration has shaped his relationship to humility and purpose. He also shares the inspiration behind his upcoming opera, Dolores. Let's get into it. The conversation starts in just a moment. This show grows because of people like you, not some algorithm. So if something in today's conversation sparks something for you, the best way to support it is to follow the podcast and to share it with someone who'd get it too. You'll find links to subscribe, follow us on Instagram, or support on Patreon, all in the show notes or at looseleaftransmissions.com. Now, on to my conversation with Nicolás Lell Benavides. This is the first time that I think we have ever actually spoken with one another, and I just love your music, and I'm surprised it's taken us this long. We followed each other on social media for some time, and I always love seeing all your posts about your music and all just your life in general outside of music. So I've really been looking forward to this conversation, and I just want to thank you so much for your time and generosity today and letting us learn more about you.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and especially a pleasure to meet you today. I agree. I can't believe we haven't talked yet.
Yeah, I think there was we kind of exchanged brief messages. I had posted about going to a Mars Volta show,
yeah.
And you were like, "Oh, I love the Mars Volta," and I was like, "I gotta have Nicolás on the podcast."
Yeah, the Mars Volta, maybe for later. The Mars Volta might be part of the reason I became a composer.
Okay,
indirectly. Yeah.
Okay. I'm looking forward to it then. So where we like to begin on the podcast on Music Maker is really as far back as you're willing to share or as far back as you can remember as it pertains to your creative journey. So that is, what is your earliest artistic memory as a composer?
I mean, like most kids, and I'm lucky I have a 4-year-old now. I was always making up songs, but that's not unique. Every kid does. Like my kid does the most amazing mashups of every nursery rhyme he knows, and I'm
Nice.
like, that is a wild collection of a spider and a duck running away, and
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
all
yeah,
the
yeah.
conventions. But I think to answer your question more directly, I think I started in high school. I played jazz and folk music. I played rancheras and corridos on the saxophone with my grandpa, who was an accordionist, and I played in the jazz ensembles. And that kind of led me to prog rock. And in a prog rock band with my friends, I started pushing the limits of, I think, what I wanted to do storytelling wise in a band format. Bands, when they write songs, it's very collaborative. And I started really wanting to control the narrative, and not to their detriment. Like we all took turns in that sort of hot seat. But we wrote epic adventure songs about some pirates whose bones were at the bottom of the ocean, and it was like very narrative storytelling in retrospect. And I had this urge to do something that wasn't as repetitive as pop music, which I love repetitive pop music. But I think writing in my prog rock band in high school was my first time really beginning to pen things that required notation or required excessive preparation versus previously where I was covering jazz tunes and covering folk songs.
So I'm a little curious. Well, I'm always curious about kind of folks' backgrounds as instrumentalists. I think that's where we all kind of begin, or as vocalists. And it's interesting to me that you're talking about playing saxophone with your grandpa and in like the school jazz bands, but did you not play in like the concert bands or marching bands as well?
I did not play in the marching band, and I played a little bit in the wind ensemble. I got to make a huge shout out to my high school band teacher. The jazz ensemble was like more than just a jazz group. It was kind of and I'm sure it still is, like one of the premier music groups on campus. Every year, our jazz teacher would designate a different, Mr. Truitt would designate a different theme for the year, and the band would be that for the whole year. So my freshman year of high school, it was a salsa band, and I auditioned into it, I think the second half as like a sub player, and they did only salsa music the entire
That's
year and like
amazing.
played salsa shows. The next year was 1940s swing music. And we got
Okay.
period, it was like period performance. We got period mouthpieces. He found guitars from the 40s that had the thick strings that like you had to strum a certain way. He got microphones. We actually got an AM radio station slot for our end of year performance where we had sponsors and like had the boxes and did the advertisements and the skits on stage to transition. The following year was Funk Band, which was amazing. We did Tower of Power, Earth, Wind, and Fire. I sang a lot in that year, and I even met Doc Kupka from Tower of Power, who
Mm.
said one of the most iconic things to me, which was I asked him, "How do you play so together?" And he said, "Kid, you got to loosen up to tighten up." And I loved that. And then our senior year was progressive rock, actually, which we were already showing interest, or fusion music was actually what it was called. And we did like Frank Zappa. We wrote original tunes in that year. We had synthesizers, and like the whole year, it was just always a continuous theme. And honestly, I credit that with like that level of focus and study as being so pivotal for me because I didn't actually have private lessons after about 8 years old. All the reading and writing I did was through the jazz ensembles, and I also auditioned for choirs, musicals, but that was mostly because truthfully, because I was interested in the girls in those groups,
Sure.
which
Yeah.
never worked out, ever worked out. But I was really happy to be in the musical. Being in musicals was huge for me in high school.
Yeah, this is really interesting because I played electric bass in the jazz band in school, but jazz band was just like this additional, like you, I think, had to show up at like if school started at 7:30, the jazz band rehearsed at 6:30 or something like that at my school. It was like very auxiliary, and we were just kind of playing like you know the gamut of things. I think that's how most jazz. So it's like really interesting to me to hear that each year was so focused and like intentional on different musical styles. So well, and that you had an opportunity to compose. So you're writing original songs in your prog band that you're playing in outside of school, and you're getting an opportunity to also write like jazz charts, right?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it was collaborative effort. It wasn't like one composer focusing. Like we'd all get together and he would do composition workshops, which now that I teach, I understand more fully, where we would like think of a theme and like sort of improvise it together, write it at the board, talk about like what instrument should play this. But it was like a very good introduction to how do all of us together get a taste of writing music. He didn't really give any individual person like write a brand new fusion tune.
Yeah. It's like group projects
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah,
Yeah,
which was
that's cool.
perfect because composing is kind of hard.
Yeah.
It's not hard any individual thing that you do. It's hard to keep track of where you are in the process of something so intangible. So letting you just noodle and make a motif and then see it take off in the class with guidance was pretty important to me. And I should add, our school had an orchestra, had classical music. I went to a really great high school, but I was not involved with it at all. I did not know anything about classical music throughout high school. I had no idea composers existed. I could not tell you the difference between a Mozart piece and a Beethoven piece when I was 18 years old. Like I was so entrenched in jazz and folk music and rock that it just wasn't even on my radar, which sounds crazy, in Albuquerque. And my first experience with classical music was actually I was dating a girl in the Youth Symphony of Albuquerque, and she invited me to come see her youth orchestra concert. And they played Stravinsky's Firebird Suite,
Oh, yeah.
and I remember being in the auditorium with like all these high school kids, just killing it at the Firebird Suite. Just thinking to myself, like, whatever this is, I need some of this. Like, this is huge. It's extravagant. I've always been all about people playing together and the showmanship of it. And that was like, I'd never seen 100 people on stage together. She dumped me the next day, but thank God it wasn't the day before
Yeah.
because that really, right when I graduated high school, like that was like the day before I graduated or something. It really stuck with me. And all these little steps led to me signing up to be a music minor in an undergrad.
Interesting. I'd love to get into that in just a moment, but I want to back up to this experience you had in your prog band, which echoes a bit my experience in high school too. I think it was my senior year. Some friends of mine in the band class, they were like needed a bass player, and they were doing their own thing and writing songs and that kind of thing. And the songs were like pretty basic, straightforward, like, you know, 4 bar rock music, whatever that is. And then, but we also all loved like prog rock, like, Dream Theater and Rush. And, I loved the Mars Volta. I had somehow encountered them early on in high school. And so like, as soon as I joined the band and then we got like a better guitarist, we started moving into like mixed meters and stuff like that. And I wouldn't say that I had like was craving creative dominance, but it was just like, it's a lot of fun to like have that outlet. And we were all playing jazz as well. So I mean, I'm guessing that that was kind of what your experience was like. But I'm curious more about what you said about, you were kind of pushing things and wanting more narrative control and that sort of thing. I mean, what did those early efforts in creating music look like for you in that setting?
I mean, it was still always collaborative. I would never say in high school any one of us showed up with like, this is the project we want to take it. I think thankfully there was like no strife in it. Our band was called The Devil Made Me Do It, and we started off as a cover band like any school band would be, and ended up writing songs. I should have been prepared. I should look up those old song titles, like searching for like Davy Jones's bones at the bottom of the ocean and like, big adventure, almost like through composed songs that
Yeah.
where I would play sax and I'd sing and we'd play auxiliary percussion. It would not have a standard verse chorus. I wouldn't even say I was the primary writer of that. I would say all of us were kind of in it together. But I think I was the one who got the bug pretty heavily. Like, this is really fun to watch something unfold. And then at the same time, coming across like the Mars Volta, going back in time to like King Crimson, listening to Tool, and hearing how songs didn't have to follow a standard true formula before even knowing that composers existed, realizing that you really have to organize yourself. I'm not saying it has to be in written music. I don't know if they write their songs down, but you have to really rehearse and think about what is the next stage. Like, I'm not going to just say here's a D chord and yeah, just do what you want, trumpet player, on top of this. No, I want no trumpets here. Like, making intentional choices in the room and saying, when we get to this section, I want it just be bass and drums, and I want to sing on top of that, and then Max, my friend Max, play a guitar solo, and then we'll bring it back to, we said like the head or the top. We still
Right.
were jazz kids, right? But but pushing the limits, I don't mean like pushing musical limits, just pushing the limits of what I could do, what I could imagine without having a better organizational system, which is composing, which I didn't know existed. Feeling like we cannot push this song any further because I wouldn't know how to keep track mentally of you start here, you come out there, I'm going to cue you here. We're taking an open-ended solo in this section, but it's going to be on a different chord change entirely because you want to play on those changes, like all of these, which is orchestration, if you want to have a cadenza for the violin, you probably don't want to do it in E flat, right?
Yeah,
Not that they
right.
can't play it, but it's much better to be in a sharps key, right? You learn these tricks of the trade by necessity. And how do you make that artistically satisfying? I think that's what I mean by pushing the limits of what I thought I could do by rote in the room, and looking for what I could do with further study of other instruments, etc.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, I don't know, like, I listen to so much different music, and I love it when I can like talk about like this, standard indie pop music band that I love, like hearing their songs and being like, oh, I love the orchestration in this song. When like almost certainly they're not thinking about orchestration. They're just, they're like, let's add this instrument here, or take away these instruments. But here I am thinking about it like orchestration and texture, and like, oh, this is like really interesting to me. But it's just like, a standard pop song or something like that.
That is orchestration, though. Like that is the definition of orchestration, right?
Right.
Is organizing, intentionally organizing your thoughts and choosing the texture. And like for me, that's so super important. Like I love writing things down. I love written music. I love being able to read things. I studied hard. I have multiple music degrees in basically what is essentially reading and writing music. But really what I'm chasing is just a system to organize things. Like when I have students who can't read or write music that well, we talk about like, well, what do you want to get out? They're like, oh, I'm going to work on writing music. I'm going to so get better. Give me some exercises. And I'm always like, well, why do you need to read or write music? For what it's worth, I'm always in favor of having more skills in your pocket. But why? And they say, oh, well, because it's what composers should do. And I'm like, well, not necessarily. Like, think about scenarios. I want them to take ownership of at what point have you hit a barrier where you would love to say, recontextualize your music. And I'll show them, like, here's my score. And I wrote this by improvising it at the keyboard. And I show you what I changed. I wrote down what I had written, and then I noticed a pattern that I couldn't have noticed if it was just in my fingers. I'm using different parts of my brain, different muscle memories. And
Mhm.
written music helped me reorganize something or helped me like double out a motif and compose out, 20 minutes later in the piece. That helped me keep track of everything. It's just a note-taking tool. And when they start to get that, like, oh, I might want to read and write music because this helps me track what I'm working on, then it's really gratifying. But I've also had students who work in like Ableton who their note taking is actually just the sound file. Like, oh, I actually kept track of it by putting this here and I want to layer it. And the same orchestration principles apply, right? When are we
Right.
taking things away? When are we adding them? When are we doubling things? For what purpose? Are we saving something like a grand tutti, which still exists in electronic music,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
If you're doing a tutti all the time, it's not worth very much. It's for most scenarios, but and helping them understand orchestration that way has been super gratifying. Anyway, sorry, big teaching tangent, but yeah.
No, I love it. I love it, and I agree with every bit of it. Even though I don't teach, but I've probably told this story on the podcast before, but it takes me back to my first encounter with electronic music, which was in grad school, and suddenly, composing with a DAW and having, only composed, I'm putting in quotations, composed, notated music up to that point. I was like really freaked out by that. And it was my now wife, Susanna, who was a senior in the program, my first year of grad school. I was telling her about like, I don't know what to do. I've never done this before. It's like, I can't wrap my head around, what is music concrete? How do I use these synthesizers and MIDI information and all this stuff? And she's just like, it's to me, it's a little bit more liberating than notated music. And that was enough for me to be like, oh, yeah, it is. But yeah, like, of course, like they all have orchestration and texture. And,
Yeah.
after that point, like, I think my notated music became better because I was thinking about electronic music in this way that you're
Oh,
kind of talking
totally.
about with your students.
Oh, adding to your skill set and being willing to learn anything can only benefit you. Even obviously, even in adulthood, it's really hard after you finish school, uh, to be like, I don't know how to do this well. and the inclination is just to avoid it, instead of try to tackle like, okay, I'm going to study scores in this style. I'm not the best at spectralist writing, and I'm not saying that I always need it, but every once in a while, I really want to write a chord that's just stacked perfectly.
Yeah.
And rather than take a guess, I'm like, okay, I got to be a student. I got to go find a score. I got to open it up and say, okay, how is this person stacking this chord? How are they creating that popping sound that just envelops you? That's gotten really hard since leaving school.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm curious to know. I mean, you just said it yourself that organizing your thoughts on the page has become such an important part of your compositional process now. Of course, as with any composer, it would be. But what was this first Nicolás composition on the page like?
Yeah, so I did not go to school for music. I went to liberal arts college, intending to do pre med for no other reason other than I thought that's what kids do when they went to college. I actually did not want to be a doctor, um, so I didn't have
Sure.
any good
Yeah.
motivation. And it was a small music department that's like 5 music majors at a time, and so I signed up. And I signed up for voice lessons because I wanted to sing more. I just enjoyed singing. I had liked doing the musicals, and I got this great voice teacher. I promise I'll get back to composition. and
Oh yeah.
she
No.
and I took flute lessons to learn more doubling and voice lessons that first year as a music minor and music theory. And between my voice teacher, who was a French woman who played the saxophone in undergrad as well, she would really encourage me to like study, a chanson, which was so foreign to me. Like I was struggling so hard with art songs. It was like my mind was hurting every week. I loved her, so I would do it. But man, did I almost dread going because I was so bad at it and palpably bad, which is natural. And she would encourage me to like listen to like say Schumann and Dichterliebe and be like, maybe you should think about how he composed this. Like you are interested in theory and you play in these bands. Like why don't you try riffing on this? Or why don't you try sketching out a different idea for how you think it should go? Because I would naturally default to what I wanted to do. And she'd say, why don't you get it out of your system? Like, I still need you to learn the song the way it is because that's part of your education. But there's nothing wrong with also recomposing this phrase because you like it better or it suits your voice better. Nothing wrong with that. And so she encouraged me heavily before I even had composition lessons. And she started pulling out non traditional voice rep. Like, she would send all her students to sing in Nats. I always did terribly because I wasn't a serious voice student, but I loved her and I loved studying with her. And she would start to give me songs that I think were not as traditional. Songs that song singers would know, but like she would push like the weird Henri Duparc songs on me,
Yeah.
instead of always Schumann or Schubert, for example. And I just started to really fall in love with like the texture and the building blocks of it. And then at the same time, she just said, you should consider taking composition lessons. And I was like, I have never, what? That's never occurred to me. That's a thing. Like there are people here who do that. And so my junior year, it took a while. I finally switched partway through my sophomore year to music major, but I didn't start composition right away. I was taking jazz and voice, still figuring it out. And then by my junior year, junior and senior, I took composition lessons. And by then I was beginning to actually write for people. So the first thing I probably wrote was like a solo piano piece for my theory professor, which was just terrible because I'm not a great pianist. I'm much better now. I've taken a lot more piano lessons since then, but like it was kind of torn to shreds. The first, I would say, composition that still exists that one could listen to, that was only a few years after that, was a choir piece I wrote for Muse, which is a treble voices choir in San Francisco. And this is the one that means the most to me. I had written a lot of things for my colleagues, some good, some not so good. And my choir teacher offered me like $100 or something small, like just out of his own pocket. He's like, do you want to write a song for my professional choir in the city? I was in the South Bay. I'll pay you. It could just be 2 minutes. Like, we'd love to perform it. And it was like a graduation gift. And man, I stressed out so hard. I didn't know how to set poetry. I was like really at a loss. So I ended up choosing an Emily Dickinson poem that I had memorized in high school because I, like most kids, liked her poetry and I thought it'd be easy. Spoiler, it was not, because Dickinson is always harder than
Yep.
you first appear. And I spent like that first summer working on this 2 or 3 minute song as hard as I could. And everything came from a place of improvisation, lots of voice splitting. And I wrote it. And it's become one of my more popular pieces. It's still performed all the time. The girls' chorus toured it to South Africa last summer. Yeah, like it's been performed as part of the California Festival, the San Francisco Girls' Chorus, I should say. And I'm not saying every piece since then has been great, but something about the focus and the responsibility of writing a piece for a group, having seen it as a capstone of my undergraduate education and being like, you know what, I'm not just going to like go for it. I'm really going to think about every choice I make. And that was the first time I really thought about the horizontal and the vertical over and over and over again. I think previously when I wrote music, including in the prog rock band, it was always horizontal. I was just moving through. I was like, stack this next thing, stack this next thing. And that's fine in some respects. But doing pass and revision after revision to making it be the way that I wanted, that was my first, I would say, serious composition. And then I think I went downhill from there. I think I got a little cocky and wrote a lot of bad pieces after that because I was like, "Look at me, I could do this." And it took me a while to sort of ramp back up. I didn't go straight to my master's. I took time off and worked. So I had to find a private teacher and really get on the horse, so to speak.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I feel like I've talked with so many composers, and myself included, where this is like good piece, bad piece, and that's like totally subjective. It's like it's a non-linear path.
It's a
you know,
nonlinear path, and I should say by judging that, it's all in my opinion. You
yeah,
obviously, it's like you write a piece, and all of us should write quote. I'm putting quote marks, right? Bad pieces, a piece that I'm like, I don't want people to say, "Oh, that's good. Don't worry about it." I'm like, no, I actually just don't like that piece.
yeah,
I dropped my own ball. I think I could do better, and I would like to, but I'm not like that with every piece, of course. It's just
yeah, for
my own
sure.
personal preference. And I tried something, you took a swing, and I took a miss.
I do think it's amazing that this first kind of milestone piece that you're describing, it's still getting performed today, and you're speaking about it with a lot of love. Because I've also talked with a lot of composers who, still might have early pieces played, but they don't like really push it. They don't like advertise it. It's just kind of like, yeah, people play that piece all the time, and I don't know why. And I'd rather they not, but I'm not going to stop them.
They
But
could
like,
always pull it.
yeah, yeah,
you know?
yeah, right. Well, yeah, exactly. But I'd imagine like this is still a piece that like it seems to like resonate with you quite a bit.
I really love the piece actually, and it's weird because I set a lot of Dickinson songs later, and it's only because I didn't know another poet, truthfully. Once I really got into my vibe of like the stories I wanted to tell and talking about my culture or my life experiences through the lens of storytelling, like I would never set Dickinson today. I say never, if somebody offered me a, a fistful of
Yeah.
cash, I'd probably
Right.
find a way to do it still. But I'm really proud of this Dickinson that I did set. And I think for me, it was just a blank slate of exploration. And I still really love that piece. Like I was so lucky in 2023. I was invited to go hear the San Francisco Girls Chorus sing it. And I couldn't go to any rehearsals because I was in town for a different premiere with the New Century Chamber Orchestra. I literally took a taxi from across the Golden Gate Bridge, like raced, got to the girls' chorus concert in San Francisco with like 2 minutes to spare, sat down. They were like, oh, he's here. And then the girls' chorus walked out and was in the audience and sang it all from memory, which I completely floored me. They had memorized my entire song. And it was just like I hadn't thought about that song in years, and it was a really transformative experience. And I talked to a lot of the young adults after, and but the gratitude was super real. Like they really made it feel brand new for me, and hearing it be set down and then come back to life really expertly was like just one of the most gratifying gifts I could ask for. And so yeah, I'm still super proud of that song. Other pieces that I don't like, I have pulled.
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know,
yeah, for sure.
I'm not so precious. So and even then, I still every once in a while go to my website and I'm like, why do I have that piece listed? I don't like it, and I'll just take it down, which is any artist's prerogative, right?
Right, right, exactly. So is this when you decided to start really composing, you're writing the song. I mean, was that kind of the first time that you encountered a composer, like in taking lessons, or had you encountered a composer prior to getting quote unquote serious about composition?
I mean, I had totally encountered composers before from different idioms, of course. Just a composer being someone who writes music. In the classical sense, though, of like realizing I could get degrees in this and move on, the first time I encountered like a working full-time composer was probably in college. And the first big meeting that I did was at the Walden School. I don't know if you've heard of the Walden School.
Yeah.
I did their creative musicians retreat, which a lot of my professors at Santa Clara, where I went to undergrad, also either went or were on faculty for. And that was my first time where I went, and like everybody there was a composer, and everybody there was either undergrads, grad students, professionals, professors at other universities. And I remember just being so thrilled. Caroline Maloney, who still runs the program today, she was just hugely inspirational for me. Hearing someone be like, "Oh, I teach and I write music, and this is what I do for my job,"
Yeah, yeah.
it, I wouldn't say I wanted to be a composer expressly until even after undergrad. I just knew that I wanted to work in music, and in my mind, I thought I'll be a teacher. I always figured it's too late for me to be a composer. Those kids probably started when they were 8, 4. It's too late for me, but I love theory. I'm down to be a theory professor. I just got to work on my chops, and I'll compose. Like I love composing as my form of expression. But I actually didn't think it was going to be my full-time job until maybe even 3 or 4 years ago, like as my
Mm.
doctorate was wrapping up. Even through my doctorate, I was thinking I'm going to be a composition professor, sure, but predominantly a professor, a teacher. But professor doors didn't really open up for me, and composing doors did. And I think all of us in life have to like figure out at one point, stop kidding ourselves and saying, "Hey, I think actually I'm trying to do this now." And maybe financially it's a little scary, but this is the thing that is making me really happy. And I have a 4-year-old, and I'm providing enough for him by writing writing music, not as much as I'd like, but as much as I can. And I'm going to keep going for it. So yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure if I answered your question. I kind of meandered in that. I really didn't think, even though I wanted to go to composition school, I didn't think I was going to be a composer for a very long time.
I'm curious to hear what that moment that kind of like things coalesced, if it came shortly after your doctorate. I mean, when was the moment that you knew you wanted to pursue your craft as a career? Like what defined that for you, where you were finally like, yeah, I am going to do this. I can do this. And, here it is.
Well, I mean, there's probably the more romantic version, but there's probably the really truthful version, which is probably most useful for everybody, which is I did my doctorate because I was determined to be a professor. I taught at institutions before, and I realized I was never going to get the kind of job that I really wanted, which was just to be like my professors that I met in undergrad and my master's, unless I had a doctorate. So that's why I moved to do the degree. And that goal never really left my mind. I kept composing, I kept getting more opportunities that I was appreciative for and I loved. But even through my comprehensive exams, I was like, I'm doing this. I'm going to look at the job boards. I'm going to be applying for a professorship. And honestly, it was just kind of circumstances. My wife had a good job at the time with the LA Times. And so it's kind of a boring sequence of events. We decided we weren't moving because I would never make as much money as she would make at the time. Uh, or still, to be honest. But yeah, I say that as if I'm making a ton now. And we had a kid, and starting him in school and thinking about where he's going to grow up, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to off the list all the jobs in the small towns I was going to apply for, because what would she do for employment?
Sure.
He's starting to become stable. And then I was just confined to just applying to jobs in Southern California, where I currently live, and the Bay Area, where we were also looking. And truthfully, I did apply. Even this past cycle, I did apply, even though I had already started composing for most of my income. And forever runner up, not forever, maybe once a runner up, and many times just no callbacks whatsoever. It just wasn't happening to be a professor. And at some point, talking to my mentors, Gabriella Frank was hugely instrumental in guiding me. She was like, "Look, there's nothing wrong with just going for being a composer. You seem to be very busy doing it. You seem to really enjoy it. You seem to have your family is stable enough. Like, stop wasting time applying for these jobs that you may or may not get, and just try to work things out." And I think the thing that really pushed me was talking to Gabriella Frank. Principally, she's one of my just biggest influences in life, and her reminding me and laughing at me every time I'd say, "Okay, you're right, I'm going to go for it." And then 6 months later, I'd be like, "Hey, could you be my letter of rec for this faculty job that I'm applying for?" And she would
Yeah.
like, I could like feel her rolling her eyes on the other side of the phone.
Yeah.
But she was always there for me. And then like, "Oh, I didn't get it." And she's like, that's okay. You probably could do other things at the same time." Those conversations, paired with getting a Guggenheim Fellowship, which was the first huge kick in the butt to be like, focus on writing, and finding a manager who rather than me just saying, "This is a dream, can I try this out?" was like, "Oh, we can actually have a plan." My manager is Owen Summers, and Sean Okpebolo introduced us, and I didn't think I would ever have a manager because that just didn't seem like what composers did. But Owen is just such an even head, being like, hey, like this is how we can structure your career. This is where you should prioritize your time. I think we should reach out to, this person to ask about our performance of your old piece. And like he's so calm and even keeled and realistic about what could happen, what's possible. All those things at once really helped. And that I would say is a position of privilege, right? I'm not saying I just decided to do it and was like, let's go. I'm going to be a composer now because I want to be. It took a lot of failing at trying to be a professor, realistically. And Gabrielina Frank, mostly, I'm just going to call her out, really urging me. And then a really lucky break with a fellowship, like just
Yeah.
obscenely lucky, something I did not expect to ever get in my life. And if I did, it'd be 20 years from now, and trying not to, it's not a very good idiom, but like not look a gift horse in the mouth, right? Which one should totally look a gift horse in the mouth, right? If the story teaches us anything, but really analyzing it and saying, you know what, maybe I should try. And so that's what the past year has been me trying to just be a composer with mixed success, of course. Sorry, super meandering response.
No, no need to apologize. And it really speaks to me because it was about 10 years ago, 10 years and a few months ago, I was trying to decide whether or not I should go into a doctoral program. I had been accepted into maybe one or two, and the funding wasn't quite good. And I was like, oh, I can always apply, next year. And then, next year never came. And I found my path, like my day job being radio. But, in talking, and that has come with some frustrations. Like, I don't feel like I can always compose to the frequency that I wish I could.
Mm.
But, I'll talk to composition faculty at schools, and they'll be like, oh, I haven't I can never compose during the semester. I always have to like compose in the summer or compose over the holidays during Christmas. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I guess my decision isn't so bad after all. But it's exciting that not only you arrived at this point where it's like, okay, I can do this full time, but that you have, a professional in your life that can help you structure it, because that's something I think, and we can get into this more later if you'd like, but the structure of a career is something that isn't necessarily talked about too often.
No, and it's not. And it's also different for everybody in the
Right.
creative fields, right?
For
If you
sure.
try to emulate anybody's singular career, you're walking into a situation where they already occupy that space. And I'm not saying that any artist should change the kind of art they make. You're like, oh well, I guess there's no serialist composers in Long Beach, so maybe if I do serial composition, I'll be super employable, right? That's not what I'm talking about at all. I mean, like trying to take the exact same steps, the exact same residencies, fellowships, all those low odds things is not going to work out. And having someone who's like, let's try this, that didn't work. I have another plan. I have a backup plan. Let's see if we can fill up your fall with this project instead. um, we all need help.
Yeah,
We all need a
for
lot of
sure.
help learning new skills and putting things together. In school, as you know, we're trained to be selfish artists, right? We're trained to say, I'm the composer. Like I read the history books, and composers are strong-willed, and I'm right, and performers listen to me. Conductor, this is what I mean. The score has everything you need in it, and that's actually just not at all the case. All of this is so much more collaborative, both career and artistic. They're all super collaborative.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've kind of glossed over a little bit of your, you had mentioned that you graduated from undergrad and then you took some time off before pursuing a master's in composition. I'm really curious to hear about, your path from that moment to what we've been talking about here for the past few minutes. Can you share a bit of an overview or connect the dots, so to speak, of your creative journey, and whether you feel like you followed a more conventional path, whatever that might mean? I've come to realize that's like very subjective.
Yeah.
Or do you feel like it was a path that had a number of unexpected twists?
I mean, tons of unexpected twists. Saying I took time off sounds like I was completely in control of the situation,
Sure. Yeah.
which I
Yeah.
said. I said earlier. To be truthful, like I was just getting rejected from programs over and over and over again. And I never mind sharing this with my students, because when you get rejected the first time, you don't get into competition or you don't get into school, your grad school of your choice. It feels deeply hurtful. And I'm not saying that every program has your best interest in mind when they reject you, right? And is completely unbiased. But the best you can do is assume that they made the right choice for them, and you need to figure out what the right choice for you is next. So those years that I took off, I worked for a ticketing software company in tech support and spent every day, all day, getting yelled at by people because they would only call me if it was broken.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and our software was terrible in truth. So I would just get to answer the phone all day, 8 hours a day, people, and fix software issues. That helped me get into my master's. That didn't help me, but it helped me pay for my master's. Luckily, it paid well, so that helped pay for my master's. Then after that, I worked as a managing director for a nonprofit, the Left Coast Chamber Ensemble, which is a storied chamber group in the Bay Area that I just still love, and I'm on the advisory board. I worked as a part-time lecturer at a few different universities in the area, teaching everything from orchestration to theory to scoring to assistant choir directing. I sang. I'm not the best artistic singer, but I'm always on pitch and I'm a very good sight reader. So I sang in a bunch of choirs just sort of as a ringer. Um, you know, I worked for the opera as like a young teaching artist. Like I had like 4 or 5 jobs at all times after my master's, you know. I would work with kids through college age students, workshops, one-offs to every other week, going to a high school. And all these things were just like the bricks of my career. And in the meantime, almost every year I was applying for a doctorate program or a master's before that and getting nothing, like no interviews, just nothing. And I was just really lucky that I had a good cohort of artists and friends who still worked with me all the time. Like, you know, and as everybody, all my friends are going off to doctorate programs and doing the things that all of us talked about wanting to do. And some weren't, right? Some found other employment. I still had a great group of collaborators, like would put on shows together. You know, we would organize our own concerts. If we didn't have a commission coming up, we would like find money or get a small grant through Intermusic SF in San Francisco and do a show with like 2 musicians, and we'd all write pieces for them. And, you know, and I would pay the composers like $100 or $200, and I wouldn't pay myself because I wanted to just organize a concert and I couldn't write music for a whole concert, but me and 6 of my friends could, you know, and that was super gratifying. And even when I got rejected, I still always wanted to do that. And that for me just reinforced the fact that I really want to keep going. I really want to figure out what's next for me. And so it's super nonlinear path. I would have gone straight through if I could, but it wasn't until my skills were, I think, up to the right level that I got in to the program that I ended up going to. And I got rejected by that school 4 times prior without an
Wow.
interview.
Yeah.
4 whole times. And you know, some programs don't let you apply after you've been rejected 3 times. But lucky for me, that program kept looking at my application and I kept asking them after, you know, what happened? Like, how come I didn't get an interview? And they would always answer, but sometimes they would get to know me and they would say, oh, you know, you don't have any long pieces. You should write pieces that are longer, you know, like show us that you can, you know, all your pieces are like 6 minutes or less. And well, that's because I was paying myself nothing to write a 6 minute piece for a friend, you know? So I had to take on some risk and start writing longer pieces for nobody to try to figure out if that could stick, right? And that actually was great. I didn't mind getting that feedback ever because it was never artistic feedback. It was like, we want to see that you can keep the balls in the air for more than five
Yeah.
minutes at a time. And I was like, you know, you're right. I do. I want to know if I can keep the balls in the air for more than 5 minutes at a time. Using a juggling analogy, I like to juggle. Um, Juggling relaxes me. Um, and yeah, I never minded getting that kind of feedback from people that I trusted. So
Yeah, hearing you talk about like those postmasters years takes me back to like there's something like a scrappy quality that I also had like in my through my mid 20s where it's like I was producing concerts and I was composing a bunch of music as much as possible and it's like I wish I could still do that, but I have to be more selective now.
yeah, I know. Actually, I do kind of miss that. The sort of
Yeah.
it felt high stakes, but everything was actually kind of low stakes. So if you fell on your face or you wrote a piece
Yeah.
that I'm putting saying quote was bad or you didn't like it, you're like, well, you know, I decided to write a piece like for a friend who was such a good singer for one of these organized concerts, and she's so great. A piece about like she wanted us all to write pieces inspired by animals, and,
Okay, yeah.
and she was like, I was like, I want to write a piece about a squirrel that's like rabidly screaming in a tree, you know. And I was like for solo voice, and like I think she was playing a melodica too. And she was just like screeching like a squirrel and playing this melodica. And like and, and it was the worst piece on the program. And we had so much fun doing it though. And like I would never I'm so happy I had that experience. She did great. She still swears that it's a fun piece. And I remember I met somebody who was a faculty at a different university who was like, "That's a pretty cool piece." And I was like, "I don't know, man. I'm pretty sure that was terrible. I take all the blame." But I did try something brand new that I had never tried before, like a solo voice piece where she's like not just singing, like making sounds, being a character, tooting little sounds on a melodica, like, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I remember, well, in grad school, a friend of mine commissioned a really kind of quirky piece, I'll say, kind of outside the box piece for a singing vibraphonist. He wanted to sing, and he's not he might be a trained singer, but his like singing style is like going to bars and doing karaoke singing. So that's kind of like the way he sung my piece. And it's in like several different languages, and we always joked about like, oh, I'll have to like write I'll have to drink absinthe to get inspiration for this piece. I never did do that, but makes for a fun story. And my wife Suzanne and I were producing these concerts around like pop-up concerts at bars and stuff in Tampa, again, in our mid-20s. And I put this super far out piece that I wrote on the program, and people like were so like just regular people at the bar were so absorbed by this piece. And I was like, I almost feel like I couldn't get away with this piece in like a concert hall academic setting. Like people would leave kind of upset, but here like people are just like, what's going on? This is weird. That's fun. So,
I mean,
yeah.
you bring up a good point, which is that context matters, right? I think, like wondering, expecting our music as composers to fit in any situation, I think is folly, right? Understanding, not just people use audience like in a dirty way, in a sort of marketing capitalist way. I prefer the term, and they're not the same thing. There's overlap. Community, right? Like understanding who the
Right.
community is that's listening to this piece, and the community could be the people who go to Walt Disney Hall, and deciding how you're going to play with that interaction. Am I going to challenge them dramatically? Am I going to engage with them? Am I going to give them something that seems like it's going to fit in between two Brahms symphonies? I've never written that kind of piece. I'm just BSing something right now. Like we're in control of that. We're not so esoteric and detached from reality. Is this piece going to go on way better at a bar?
Right. Right.
Are people really going to enjoy this kind of piece while they're drinking beers? Like maybe. Do they need to enjoy it? Maybe not, but will they be interested by it? Like curiously, sure. Like that's part of the instrument, right? Is the people
Yeah,
listening to it.
exactly. If you really want to stay connected to what I'm building here, the best way isn't social media, actually. It's the newsletter. That's where I share new episodes, unfiltered thoughts about the creative process, ways to support the work, and whatever's coming next. You can sign up at looseleaftransmissions.com or through the link in the show notes. So I think the very first piece that I heard of yours, or the piece that I came across my desk at my radio job, was the piece of yours on Camilla, on one of their albums, one of Camilla Ensemble's albums. And I believe the piece had something to do with like the cottonwood trees in New Mexico, and like
Yeah.
your son seeing them, and so a lot of your work kind of pulls from this New Mexican and Southwestern experience of yours, which I'm also, I think it's fair to say, is like fundamentally like your life experience.
Yeah.
So for you, what feels so creatively rich or exciting about that landscape in particular, both geographically and culturally?
I mean, when I started off writing music and just being serious, like studying it, taking classes in school, which for me was how I became serious about it. I was so enamored with what felt like was really exotic to me. Like and I still feel this way. I'm catching up all the time, like learning about Brahms and singing like Ein Deutsches Requiem was like so life changing. And like Dona Nobis Pacem, I remember sang in the choir for Ray Vaughan Williams' Dona Nobis Pacem. And I went down a huge Ray Vaughan Williams, like, bender, figure out what he was all about. When first time I heard Ravel, like it blew my mind. You notice I'm talking about a lot of dead white male composers in Europe. And so I
Yeah,
spent a few years, that was the foreign music to me. I had never heard any of that stuff. I spent a few years just like fast tracking my quote traditional history book repertoire of music and writing about that. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed trying to do that. I was so disconnected from, I didn't know other composers who were young. I was so disconnected from the scene. I wasn't really writing for anybody anyway. That wasn't important to me at the time. And it really was when I sort of emerged and began to write for people, and people began to ask, like, what do you want your music to be about? What is this piece about? That I took a huge step back and was like, you know, I don't know why I'm writing about poets from Boston. I'm not from Boston. She died way before I was born. Like, I don't really know,
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
what do I have to add to this story? I'm sure, and there is something one could add. Why am I writing about, why am I trying to reset poetry by Goethe? Or why am I writing about some movement that happened in Amsterdam, to be really vague about things. Like, what about where I'm from? And then it all came flooding back to me. Like, growing up in high school, studying American history, all American history happened between, like, Washington, D.C. and Boston, as far as textbooks were concerned. But I grew up in New Mexico. I know a lot of important things happened in New Mexico, way back through, like, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo and prior. Like, the Puebloans kicked out the Spanish at one point for like a dozen years. Like, that's amazing. One of the most successful indigenous revolts in the history of the continent. And it's just swept over for all of the important events, of course, that happened in Boston, DC, Philadelphia. And it came from curiosity. It wasn't really like I know more than everybody else. I know a little bit more than a lot of other people who aren't from there, but not a lot. And if I'm going to spend my time researching something to write a piece about it, I'd like to learn about myself and where I come from. My music is not like a diary. I don't usually write about my direct life experiences, but I use projects as excuses to learn about things that really matter to me, like folk tales. Like, I have these tomes, I'm gesturing to the bookcase above the monitor, of oral histories by Juan B. Rael. It's called like Tales of the Hispanic Southwest. And he spent decades in the mid 20th century just interviewing people, like, tell me your story. And he would write down, they're all in Spanish, from northern New Mexico and Colorado, just folk tales. And then those got transferred into Rodolfo Anaya's cuentos. He chose like a dozen of them and did his own version, his own take on them. And realizing that these folk tales are not solidified in the past, like, they are actually really malleable. I could do my own take on Rodolfo Anaya's take of Juan B. Rael's transcription of an old wives' tale from
Right.
150 years ago that may actually take roots from some indigenous story or some colonist story from before that. We can't get all the information there, but being in conversation, being part of a lineage of conversation, has been very interesting to me. So a lot of my work these days is focused on things that other people, I don't think, are talking as much about. Like, I love talking about landscapes, like you mentioned, the Kemia ensemble piece, Little Cloud, which is about cottonwood, cotton falling, and I wrote it as a lullaby to my son who was being born at the time. To, like, pieces about the sage grouse, my piece Lek, about their mating rituals of the sage grouse in Utah. To Doña Sebastiana, which is a piece about Santa Muerte, Lady Death. It's a story of this woodcutter who argues with Jesus and Mary, Catholicism and indigeneity clashing, which is what happens there, right? Arguing with them that they don't treat the poor very well. And Santa Muerte, a sort of more spiritual figure from the continent, arrives and offers him a way out. And she ends up tricking him at the end because, of course, I'm sure the Catholics had their way of censoring things at the time. But seeing that kind of story where figures like that are challenged feels like that wouldn't have come from somewhere else. And I want to learn more about it. And so if I'm going to spend my time being a student of something, I'd like it to be a student of something that has to do with why I am the way that I am. And sometimes I learn things that are really fun, and sometimes I learn things that are really terrible historically, and all of that's part of where I come from. So those are the stories that I want to tell.
I know that you mentioned that you don't treat these pieces necessarily as like a diary of your life experience, but in doing this research for this music, do you feel like you have uncovered things about your personal life or about yourself in some way that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise?
I mean, obviously, yes. Every piece affects me greatly. A lot of people say you leave a piece of yourself in everything that you write, create, paint, draw. Every artist does. But I think that work leaves its own imprint on you as well. right? You can't be the
Yeah.
same. I mean, for me, the most tangible example is my opera that's about to premiere with librettist Marla Martin Cook about Dolores Huerta. Like, I grew up with Dolores. She's in my family. I know her, but I didn't really get a chance to dive into exactly how important she was. Like, yes, I knew, and I in Latin American history classes and classes about the civil rights movement, yes, I knew, but to really, really put my mind and my soul in her shoes at the time, to be able to paint a picture of her in this opera, has affected my already favorable view of union organizing to be even higher. And now it's less of an obligation of like that's the right thing to do, and more of like a my everything in my being says we have to fight for justice, right?
Right. Right.
And I'm not saying that I'm a model citizen at doing that, but the way that I care about it is deeply changed. Same thing with writing about my dad's irrigation practices with my piece Acequia, about how he irrigates the land the way that people have done it for hundreds of years. I love to plant a garden as well, and thinking about where water comes from, where it's going, how I can be judicious. I mean, I have a native plant garden in my front and side yard where I live because it's very low water. And yes, it isn't always the most beautiful because it goes dormant sometimes. But I'm very proud of like knowing and identifying hundreds of native species in my yard, you know? And that probably comes from spending time living that experience with my dad, watching him irrigate, and then zooming out and learning about how everybody irrigates in New Mexico and how that's different from the rest of the country, you know? So yeah, I definitely am changed by every piece I do. If not the actual music writing, then by the research and the considerations, either as an artist or as a person, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know a lot of your recent work centers on Calo and the Pachuca identity, and you mentioned how diving into that dialect and subculture became a way to fuel the creative fire. So first, can you talk a little bit about what this is for those who may not know, and also what was surprising for you as you went deeper into that world?
Yeah, so I'll start with Pachucos because Pachucos are it's like hipsters or yuppies. It's like a sort of demographic or a style or a group of people who are together. Pachucos traditionally the culture comes from El Paso and migrated west and really settled in LA and sort of left its mark all throughout the American Southwest. Pachucos were a movement of people mostly during and post World War II who were Mexican American, Hispanic, Latine, who took a lot of pride in their culture. Instead of suddenly being ashamed of who they were wearing zoot suits, they were dancing mambo, they were making up slang like any other culture or subculture would make up slang. They would modify their cars, right? They would walk with swagger. And actually, the Pachuca movement is still very much alive in Southern California, where I live. I mean, I think I could see a lowrider 2 or 3 times a week just driving down the road, right? And
Right.
I freaking love lowriders, actually. I really do. My cousin has one, those old Oldsmobiles. So those are the people, right? And infamous for having like the Zoot Suit riots, which were really instigated by the United States Navy at the time, people who were back from the war. Kalo is the dialect that they spoke. So saying like, we're saying a word like way means like dude, like guachame is like sort of you'd mix up indigeneity and English and Spanish. So guachame means like watch me, like if you're dancing, like
Mm,
guachame,
yeah.
or like making up little rhymes, like "que te pasa calabaza," like "what's up pumpkin," just because it rhymes and it's fun. This just learning about that dialect was hugely important to me, and it was because my grandparents were Pachucos on my dad's side, especially. My grandparents were all my family's all from New Mexico, but on my dad's side, my grandma and grandpa Benavides dressed super sharply. Like there's these amazing pictures of them with like a sort of pencil thin mustache, like beautiful shirt. Like her hair was like my grandma's hair was braided and she had this beautiful blouse standing in front of like an old like Chevy truck, like leaning up against it, like short sort of like 50s shorts, right? My grandpa had like the pomaded hair with like the boucle, like a curl on top that was just perfect, right? And they would dance mambo and he would speak a certain way with a certain accent. And I realized that as a kid, you just think, oh, my grandparents just speak with an accent, and realizing that it's actually different than a usual Spanish language accent. It's actually a Kalo accent. It's from speaking like, I'm sure 50 years from now, I'll speak with a certain like trendy accent from, the 2020s,
Sure.
whatever
Yeah.
that means. And my kids and grandkids will be like, grandpa speaks kind of funny. And instead of thinking that's just how old people speak, we should be asking, why do they speak that way? Did they speak that way when they were young? What was their life like when they were young? Because we so often see people as they are in the moment instead of as a collection of their stories. And when my grandpa passed, I wrote a piece called Rinconcito, which was an instrumental piece to sort of process the grief about losing him and losing his stories and all those things. And it really set me down a path of like, well, what is Kalo? Like, can I learn to say words like he said? Can I learn to interpret what he said? So we interviewed him. I have messages from him. I have sound clips from him speaking, and it just really set me off in this inventive way. And even now, I'm writing a piece. I'm so lucky. I'm gonna have to like put on my like I'm boastful cap for a second, but I have to
Please do.
talk about
Yeah.
this piece, which I try to avoid doing. But I'm so lucky. I'm doing a piece for the LA Phil and Dudamel this coming season, which I'm like so pinch me beyond myself excited that I got chosen to do this for his farewell season. And we're all being inspired by the Great Wall of LA. And I really, really wanted to write about the Zoot Suit riots and the movement, and not because I want to write like a Zoot Suit riot. Like I don't want to do that,
Sure, yeah,
right? And nor do I want to write like a Bernstein-esque mambo, right?
Yeah,
from
yeah.
West Side Story. I really want to spend time learning about something that I don't know as much about, which is exactly what transpired from the point of view of the Pachucos. Like, what were they really arguing about? I know that they were seen as disrespectful because at the time when we were rationing, having excessive fabric and clothing was seen as wasteful, and we should be using fabric for the war effort and copper and gasoline, etc. But also, like, there's an inherent value in artistic expression and community and resilience, right? Part of you wonders if it wasn't the Mexican Americans and Chicanos and Hispanic and Latino populations dressing that way, if people would have been like, oh, well, we need it for solidarity and community. Like, it's okay to, why was it that that was worth starting a fight over at the time? And why did it spread so rapidly? It wasn't just about that fight the night of, right? It had to have been long simmering misunderstandings and issues over years throughout the war that led to that kind of situation. So, I'm super happy to be writing that piece, but it's still there after even writing a song cycle, writing instrumental pieces, thinking about this topic. It keeps giving. And if David Teltredegy can write about Alice in Wonderland over and over again, I could write about
Yeah.
Pachucos over and over again, right? Why not?
This dialect, Kalo dialect, I mean, if I may ask, I mean, is there anything like musical about it, or is there anything about this dialect that you can draw from, like musically, whether that's like rhythm or, I mean, do you kind of look to these sources as like direct musical inspiration in that way, or is it more just simply the subject matter of your pieces?
It's kind of a mix. So when I think about my song cycle, which was when I really went down this rabbit hole called canto calo, which just means I sing calo, or it could also mean calo, songs in calo, right? And I set some text set by my grandfather. I also had my collaborator Melinda Martinez Becker. She's the mezzo who premiered the pieces, write some thoughts of her own, and I also wrote some original poetry, which I don't usually do, but that's one of the few autobiographical pieces I would say that I've set. But it's still removed. Some of the songs take from the corridos that you would hear from the frontera region, like música norteña, sort of sounds like the like trying to think of the best way to describe it. Like when you think of loud guitars, people singing outside, right?
Yeah.
Like you think of
Yeah.
not exactly mariachis, but sometimes mariachis, right? Singing. You think of that effect. That occurs sometimes in the piece, sure. And I even modeled the corrido, that's the finale, after one of my favorite corridos that I played growing up. I modeled it out in structurally, not really by words or musically, just thinking about how do you tell an adventurer's story moment to moment. And I tried to write words that told a similar adventurer story, except for instead of being some assassin, my adventurer is an accordion playing bard traveling the countryside, playing music in different towns, right? Which is an homage to my grandfather Garcia. So yeah, like musically it's there, but oftentimes it's also not. I some of the songs like the one that Melinda wrote about how her grandmother, who's New Mexican as well, would like braid her hair. I think it sounds far more, I mean, I don't even know, far more contemporary American as a compositional style. And other moments sound, you know, I can't think of anything else other than contemporary American and the way that like tonality has been pushed in
Sure.
extensions work, and it's still tonal. There's still a center, but it's not a throwback. It's not meant to sound old. It's meant to sound of today, right? And so it bounces back and forth, and I think the interest happens in the the pendulum swinging from what is it like to dip my toe into an old style and then come back and try to sound like me right now. And actually, that's what the piece is about. It's about remembering my grandparents and her grandparents, going into their time and reflecting on how they felt like being drafted into the Korean War, and then back to modern time. What does it feel like to hear his story now? And that's where the cycle exists.
Yeah. That's incredible. So you've mentioned a time or two that you know you're not really approaching any of these topics that we're talking about as an expert, but rather you're more inviting the audience to go on like this learning journey with you. And some other subject matters of recent work you told me before this chat that you've been exploring, climate issues and Latinidad. Can you talk more about how this approach of like making the process a learning journey shapes your compositional work?
Yeah, I find that composing is and always has been hard for me. Even when I write fast, I'm a decently fast writer when I get going. It's still hard for me. It's hard for me to maintain focus. It's hard for me to be motivated. Like I love it when students are like, "Oh, how do you have good habits? How do you stay motivated all day?" And I'm like, "Oh God, I'm the worst at it." Like I literally have to
Yeah,
like beg myself to work. But if I get really interested in something and I feel a duty and an obligation to explore it, that's not musical usually, which is so funny to say.
sure.
I will then begin to problem solve like, oh my gosh, like how water flows from the mountains into the aquifer in Albuquerque. Like, okay, that's such a beautiful image. Like, how do I paint that picture? And I don't really care if the audience knows for an instrumental piece what I'm even thinking about. I assume that if I care deeply about a topic and I write music that I care deeply about, that the audience might also care deeply about, or at least be interested by. And then if the actual reason for writing that music is important to them, some of them may go explore it, but it's not a requirement, right? I don't need people to think about irrigation when they hear acequia, or think about homesickness in New Mexico when they hear carencia. Obviously, with sung music like the opera about Dolores, I would imagine they should think about the labor rights movement of 1968, right?
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
Otherwise, I'm not doing
Hopefully.
my job, right? But it's really a matter of finding ways to make me care so deeply that I feel like I have no choice but to explore it in the best way that I possibly could. Like Doña Sebastiana, the piece about Santa Muerte for Daniel Hope and the New Century Chamber Orchestra. I don't really care if they know the whole backstory and how I'm so interested in how this folk tale is about like the clash of like how the Christianity at the time rightfully was really not serving poor people at all, right?
Right.
The missionaries were ruthless and vicious, and how did people cope? They probably told folk tales about how Jesus and Mary, that maybe they don't care about the poor. And maybe this spirit does. Actually, they're looking for answers. I'm not saying that they're right or wrong, or that I'm right or wrong, but suddenly I feel a duty to like explore that deeply, and that matters a lot to me for how I wrote the piece, but it does not matter to me if the audience quite gets it. Hopefully, they just get that it matters to me as a writer, if that makes any sense at all.
No, I think it does, but I also, I often have conflicting thoughts about, I I hesitate to use this word, but it's the only word that comes to mind, like, activism in music for myself. I think it's great when other people do it, but I'm always kinda like, "Is there really a point in me doing this?" And when I say activism, I mean, like, writing about irrigation practices is, like, kind of activist in these days, for better or for worse, I think. But I've come to realize that, even if it doesn't fully register, I feel like if one person is in the right place at the right time to receive like this message through a piece of music, then that's enough. I think
Yeah.
you don't have to be like smacking people over the head with it. It's just like just opening a door and inviting people to think a little bit about these things that you or I or any number of artists we care about deeply.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I don't know what what effect music that has activist in nature on average can change in contemporary. Obviously, art is powerful, art changes people's minds and it does things. I don't think artists can hide behind saying like, oh, I can still be selfish with my time and my career. And if I only write the perfect piece, people are going to totally fight against climate change. I think there's nothing wrong with writing a piece about climate change because obviously I do it too.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's
yeah.
something about the whole package of like if I live a certain way, writing a piece about water, studying with Gabriella Frank and composing Earth. That piece was about through that program, by the way, helped affect me like personally. Like I changed the thermostat to be warmer than it otherwise would be. I have more fans that use less energy, right? I'm willing to just sweat in my chair a bit longer than I used to. And I really hesitate to fly. I still fly when I have to, but a lot of these things are part of the whole ecosystem of being an artist and a citizen and a human. And if you're principled and if you care about these things, sure, it'll come out in your art, but it'll also come out in your livelihood and your lifestyle and conversation. I'm sure that I've probably done more good change for the world by just talking to people than I have with my art. Like I must have, right? I doubt anybody's heard a string quartet of mine and been like, that's it. I'm never going to use gasoline again, you know? Like that's just not, it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
going to happen. But it's part of everybody working together and realizing that you are important as an artist, but you're also part of a larger puzzle piece of people. And all of us want our skill sets to do something important, right? I mean, if I really wanted my every waking minute to be the most important waking minute for the planet Earth, I probably should have gone into like climate science, truthfully. You know, I wonder what I could have done there. And I don't have those skills. I don't know how to sit on a boat in the ocean and like study, algae levels and figure out how that's affecting Earth or how to discover a new chemical to,
Yeah.
to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions with catalytic converters. Like, I don't know how to do that. What I do know how to do is write music and look up stories. And, and that's what and I think everybody else is doing with our time is the best we can with the skills that we have. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just with you. I don't expect to have any grand policy changes with any individual piece, but maybe over the course of a career, maybe I might affect something. That would be great, actually.
Yeah, change people's minds a little bit, get them thinking about things a little differently, I
Yeah,
think. And
yeah,
that to me, that's the point of artistry, I think.
yeah,
And probably why they want to get us to be quiet. So,
yeah. Exactly. It's a marathon in the
yeah,
arts. It's not a sprint, right?
yeah, yeah, for sure.
No individual piece was going to make a difference, but you never know when you might look back and be like, "Wow, that was the start of something." 20 years
Yeah,
ago, I wrote my first piece about water, and now here I am. I'm talking
yeah,
in front of the UN. I'm projecting, right?
yeah, yeah,
Talking in front of the UN about water rights in the Southwest.
yeah. So usually by the time I get around to asking this question, the answer has been given in some form or fashion, but I'll ask you more directly.
Sure.
And that is, what would you describe as the primary pillars of your creative practice? So what philosophically or aesthetically or stylistically, I suppose you could just musically, forms the foundation of the work that you do?
I think the way I approach every piece, uh, aside from researching something, for me, everything has to be programmatic or has to have a reason. And it's not because I know we've said this before, not because I need people to understand the reason, but because I need the reason. I've realized I need the reason to do something. I need the thing to push against. It's like being in space, floating around with nothing to resist you, right? You can wave your arms as much as you want, moving frantically, but you're not going to go anywhere unless you have an object to push against or to climb over, right? I feel weightless when I don't have a goal when I'm writing music. And so I always need to find something to push against, even if it's as simple as writing a piece based on intervals, which my piano pieces that I just did are based on that. And then I need to figure out how to alternate. I have to create a sort of oscillation between organizing my thoughts and playing. And that is always so hard for me because we're creatures of habit. Once you start, playing, sitting at the keyboard, improvising, that's all I want to do. I'll do that for days, right? And at a certain point, I'm realizing all of those improvisations are out the window and they're out of my head and they're gone. And I just like, what good is it if I didn't write them down or I didn't save them or I didn't make a voice memo with them? And transitioning from improvising and playing to organizing my thoughts and then back and forth is like the hardest thing for me. But it's the only way that I can get a piece done. And I feel like two people, I'll be there saying, okay, you gotta write this down and then sit down at your desk and like sketch it with a pencil. I always write with pencil and paper first, not
Yeah.
fully, but just to sketch. But I hate it. I hate doing it. My handwriting's terrible. I hate looking at my handwriting, you know? Um, but if I go straight into the computer, uh, I lose something. I find that my ideas become sterilized. And some people can do that. I just can't. Um, so it means something different each time. If I'm writing a piece that has electronics, organizing can count as manipulating the sound, bringing that sound file in and toying with it. Playing can mean writing it down on a pencil and paper and looking at it upside down, doing the nerdy thing and doing a retrograde. Like, what does it look like in retrograde? What about if I harmonize a new chord over each note of this melody and it's like 2 measures per note, trying all these tricks and seeing which one sticks on the wall, like going through a process of trying things that you like and things that you haven't tried before. That one's, once I'm doing that, I'm enjoying it, but transitioning back and forth is really tough. I don't know if I quite answered your question. I didn't give you like any
No,
exact like
no,
artists or like,
no, I think it's great. And my next series of questions touch on all the things you just said. So I'm very thankful for that. But hearing you talk about writing, but I'm the same way, like, and you put into words something that I've not quite been able to articulate, which is like when I compose straight into the computer, which I have no problem with. I have no judgment for other people doing. Even though sometimes it might sound like it. Something does get lost. Like you're right, sterilizing my ideas is what it does. I don't know, what that is, but
well, I think I could actually maybe say it a bit more directly even.
sure.
We all have limitations, right? Limitations are good. Limitations help us understand. I get confused when there's no limitations. They help us understand what's possible and not possible and what needs to be possible that's not currently possible. When I work at a computer, the limiting factor in Sibelius, I use Sibelius, God help me, is is the computer wants me to do certain things in a certain order, right?
Yeah, right.
And I can resist it as much as I want, but I'm actively resisting the computer trying to make me notate a certain way. And my imagination just gets slightly like slapped on the wrist with a little like ruler, over and over and over again, ever so slightly, but it's annoying and it adds up over time. Similarly, when I'm at the keyboard, I'm an intermediate pianist. I improvise at the piano all the time. I study jazz piano, classical, but I'm not a great pianist, right? I'm limited by what my hands and muscle memory and musicianship can allow. At a certain point, I hit those limits and I cannot arpeggiate a chord any faster. I cannot grab, my hands only get like a ninth or maybe a tenth if I'm lucky, right? If I'm really feeling warm and flexible. I can't arpeggiate chords with great accuracy and frequency. I don't immediately grab the right harmonization that I know I could grab if I had sat down to think about it. So moving from my hands to pencil and paper, where there's another limitation, right? I can't work fast, but I can do anything I want, to the computer and sort of going through those three helps me keep in check which limitation I'm dealing with at any given moment in time. And maybe it'd be different if I was, an expert pianist and I could do everything at the piano. But I would assume not. There's still limitations of the human body, right? And I tell my students too, which I don't teach as much anymore or at all actually right now. Like acknowledge what the limit of what you're dealing with is and see if you can push up against it and then figure out what you need to do to move past that. Like, use a voice memo. If you can't notate fast enough, I love voice memos. I'll improvise, I'll voice memo myself, and then I'll bring it onto my computer and I'll notate based on the voice memo so that I'm held accountable. Like, oh, hey, my notation could be sterilized, but I really need to get that rhythm exactly right. Oh my God,
Right.
it's not a triplet. It's actually a quintuplet with quarter, quarter, eighth note,
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
did it over and over. So I know I did it on purpose and it's very intentional. This happened in my Dolores opera.
Yeah.
there's a 5/2 with like a little skip in the middle. And the pianist was like, "Oh my God, like, why did you write it this way? I couldn't have just been triplets," but I played it for him. I could play it because I
Right,
had
right.
written it that way. And once I played it for him and I explained, like, no, this is how it is. And actually the melody sort of needs to feel a little lopsided because this is happening, underpinning the action. And he was like, okay, I got it. I'll practice it. I'll get it. And he had it the next day. It was totally fine. But it was pretty fun to sit there with a pianist who was like exquisite, like the best of the best, and be able to play something better than him. But if I had gone straight to Sibelius or notation software, I totally would have written it as a triplet instead of quarter, quarter, eighth in a quintuplet, right? I totally would have sterilized it to become a triplet instead of stick to my guns and do what I knew musically I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah, it was in grad school when my teacher, because I up until grad school I composed Oh, I was a finale
I'm
user.
sorry.
I got I got booted away from it. Um, but just composed straight into finale. Up until I was 21 when I went to grad school, and my teacher was the one who pointed out to me, and I think it was to all of us in the class. He was like, "The problem with notation softwares is that it makes you decide a meter right from the beginning." And that's all he had to point out for me to be like, "Oh, yeah, there's something not right about that." Because of course, like when you write by hand, I don't
Oh
worry
yeah.
about that. I go in afterwards and put them all in
I
in
was
a
gonna
way
see if
that
I have my notebook. I was gonna show you in my notebook. I actually, when I write, and I show my students this too, I write stemless notation, and I don't write any bars when I sketch.
oh, that's
And
cool. Yeah.
it's all like I'll do like a dotted note. I'll like do like just note heads, and I'll even do the words underneath or whatever. Or I'll write words above being like syncopated. Something I might not know the syncopation right off the bat, but I'll remind myself, and I'll space the notes based on how syncopated they are. And that allows me to redraw the bar lines, and I'll go back and add the beams, and I'll flag things properly, and I'll figure out exactly how they're supposed to go. But for me, it's all about going fast. I need to get something down fast before it leaves my mind. I have a 4-year old, so my brain has holes in it now. Um, I don't think as well as I used to, so I have to get things down fast. And it's all dots, lines, squiggles. It's all very esoteric and like very, very abstract. And that has worked really well for me because I'll clean it up when I get to Sibelius, but I need to just get it
Yeah.
imprinted on something before I lose the idea. I feel like I'm constantly holding sand that's falling through my hands. When I write music, that's just what it feels like. And I need to take a snapshot before it goes away. So it's all dots, no bar lines until I'm cleaning it up later. Maybe like a whole note here and there for a long held note, but nothing specific.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I also feel that way, and I do not have a child. So I love that sand analogy as much as I empathize with the feeling of it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious now because something that you mentioned to me before we met up today was that you can't write as fast as you used to, despite you describing that you have to get things down as quickly as possible. That now it's like partly because you're being more thoughtful. So of course, like there's a lot of I can imagine there's a lot of tension in all of these feelings and thoughts that you have. I mean, what is slowing down to in the ways that you can taught you about how you build a piece, especially that middle stage where you said that you tend to get bogged down.
Yeah. I, I've been thinking a lot about having said that to you, and then and then wondered if I regretted saying that or not. And I've actually been thinking about this question the most out of all of the things that in our like pre-interview that we had talked about.
Yeah,
I kind of want to revise what I said in that I think I could still write as much music as I used to if I wanted to, but the desire has shifted from enjoying creation of brand new material and new measures, new minutes, to revising the things that I just wrote down. So in the past, I would have said, "Oh, I can write 3 minutes of a fast piece in a day," sketch, not, I mean, like a short score. And these days, it's more like 1 minute, but it's because I actually sort of rewrite those 3 minutes over and over on that 1 minute, over and over, and I pass it and I revise, and it's like I just keep going over it back and forth, looking for where's I can nip and tuck it. And is the effect really that high of a percentage of success when it's all said and done? I would say yes, it's important to me, so therefore it's important, right? Maybe that extra 16th note that I adjusted the last half hour of the day wouldn't really be understood or heard or processed by the audience or the conductor, but it matters to me. And I
yeah,
take a lot of pride in the specificity of that notation. I think so. That part has been frustrating, is feeling like I can write fewer seconds or minutes of music per day. And I'm really meticulous, by the way. I set out spreadsheets when I wrote my opera, like which is like, over 2 hours. I have a giant Excel spreadsheet. I look like an engineer. I'm like every moment, who's singing in which moment, breaking each aria or duet into different 30-second chunks and being like, and it always changes, but being like 4 months from now, I'm gonna be writing the first 30-second short score of this aria, you know? And I spend all this time setting these goals. The goalposts always move. But realizing that my old predictions from years ago of like, I'll write a minute of this aria become 30 seconds has been frustrating because the calendar just expands for when I can tell people I'll finish a piece. But at the same time, I don't, what is it, like Mark Twain said? Like, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter, right?
Yeah.
It feels that way
Yeah.
actually. Like, if I had less time, my pieces get longer. And the more time I have, the more that effort stacks on top of itself and becomes a shorter, but I think better piece. I still push the limits. I always push the limits, not intentionally. If you tell me write a piece that's 7 to 10 minutes in our contract, I'll aim for 7 and I'll almost certainly write 10.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
every damn time. And I know that's not the smartest thing to do, but honestly, I like that upper limit. I don't mind it. I'll get to 10 and it'll turn into 12 and then I'll start to like retake things out and repair it. And it's like a fight and I'm bringing it back down to 10 and maybe I'll get it to 9 minutes and 30 and I'll feel like I'm really winning this fight now, I'm really proud of sacrificing what I don't need in the piece to tell the point, but that's the difference now is I think the effort is the same day to day, but the number of measures, the seconds of music at the end are far fewer. And I'm really happy about that. I think I look at each bit of material that I'm working with, and I wonder how much value does this have? And the answer is always a lot more value than I gave it credit for in the first place. A motif or a chord or a way of harmonizing something or an instrument, like, oh God, how much could I do with an oboe? I just wrote a piece for oboe, right? And string quartet, like really,
Yeah.
really feeling concerned about that. And then suddenly the piece is like, supposed to be 20 to 30 minutes. And of course the song cycle is like 30 minutes now, right? Because I really loved hearing that oboe so much once I really got into the mindset of what could I do with it. And I always thought there's going to come a day when I'm going to ask, can I add another instrument? Can I add another instrument? And she knows this. I told Anne Marie Gabriel, the oboist, I kept thinking to myself, I'm going to have to ask for more, but I'm going to try not to. And I knew deep down I was never going to ask for more, but always wondering that question. Okay, is today the day? No, there's something else I could do. That's a really cool trill. Why don't I play with this trill? There's just so much value, inherent value in so many things in the world. And it's a huge privilege to be in the place of finding that value, I think, as an artist. Um, it's where I end up.
I totally relate to everything that you're saying, and I've told people, like, I kind of frame it like, I don't know if this is because I'm getting older, but my music's getting longer, and I'm like, and like, I don't really know if that's actually the case. I mean, I am getting older, obviously, um,
Well,
but it's like a process that's been developing for me. Like everything you just said, I completely agree with, and it's been developing for me over the past, I would say, probably 3 years seriously, where I feel like maybe if we're looking at like 100% of the time it takes me to like start working on a piece to like double bar line deliver it, maybe like 60 to 70% in the past was, getting the notes on the page and then making slight adjustments and then of course like cleaning up the score and then sending it along.
yeah,
And now it's like 20% is just getting the notes on the page.
totally.
And then I spend 50% like poring over every beat. I almost said every measure, but it's like sometimes it's like beat by beat. I'm like you said, like, what if I had this note what if I changed this note to like reharmonize it in this way? What if I flip the chord upside down? Oh, but like, a half note doesn't feel long enough. Should I put a fermata on it? Should I add like another half note, make it a whole note?
Yeah.
It's like always negotiating with like the material now, which I love. It's like so much fun, but also, like you said, it's like, oh, I gotta like let people know now that this is how I am.
Yeah. I mean, and also, I love what you just said. It's also like, but it sounds a little bit like when I say it that way, like I'm making pieces needlessly complicated, right? And I'm like, oh, this little minutiae of detail. It's like, Chopin, right, was famous for that, for doing a different repetition that just made it such a pain in the ass to memorize, right? And for like pianists know this. But actually, I find that my pieces make more sense the more I revise them. The more that like I tell everybody, like, there's so much brilliance in the subconscious, right? Like, you really finding a way to be in conversation with your subconscious is so important, because sometimes my hands, when I do a voice memo, will grab something that is like motivically related to something from the very beginning of a piece.
Mm, yeah.
And I notated it the other way. And then I'll be looking at it over and over and I'll realize, like, oh my God, it's like basically the same device I used at the beginning, but like missing the last third. And instead of the last third, it goes up instead of down or whatever. And taking the time to notice the patterns that my muscle memory did without my permission, or with my permission, but without my knowledge. And thank my subconscious for figuring that out for me and identify that issue and find a way to tie it in even more deeply has been so huge. I I think I haven't written a through composed piece truly in like a decade. I want to, I set out to, but the pattern finder in me keeps finding patterns. I'm not saying that I write things with prescribed forms, but I keep wanting to be like, I'm going to write a through composed like 8-minute piece that never does the same thing. But I just love finding patterns now, and I love matching things from minute 2 to minute 4 and being like, oh, remember this little figure? It's going to change now. And I kind of get why that people were like, well, Beethoven was obsessive, like like ba 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 bum, right? I know everybody quotes that, but like I recently listened to that with some students last year, again talking about motivic development, and I was just like, man, this is really great, actually. Good for you. Great effing
Yeah.
job at
Right.
developing this, like milking every ounce of precious value out of those 4 notes.
Right.
Like that's exciting. It really gets my heart racing. And yeah, I don't think I could write music without being excited about finding patterns.
Yeah, totally. This feels like very related to something else that I would just love to talk about because I feel like it's something that almost never gets talked about among composers. I mean, maybe tangentially or maybe a little bit in school, but I don't remember ever talking. And that's like project management, like the act of project management itself, related to a piece of music. And you mentioned building out like a spreadsheet for your opera, for example. I mean, that's the kind of like craziness that I stoop to as well. I'm like framing it like a negative, but I love it. Like it's like
I don't know how anybody else does it. I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
the more that I can like organize my thoughts around a piece, the more I feel like ready for it. Like it's like, okay, like I can proceed now without, anything weird happening to me or this piece. So I'd love to like just talk about this as someone who also loves this kind of stuff. I mean, can you walk me through how you approach project management beyond just like a spreadsheet, and what you've learned about your own creative rhythm through that kind of planning?
Oh yeah, totally. And it's I'm always wrong, I should say. Whenever I set out, I say it's going to take this amount of time, and I know that, so I set the schedule to end a little sooner than the deadline, and then that
Yeah.
allows me to like say, oh, this day I did not do what I set out to do, so I can add a day, scoot it all back, and I pride myself on usually being pretty on time. Yeah, so I realize that I have to treat myself like different job functions. So what do I value in writing a piece of music? Well, I value the research, the non-musical research. I value score study and musical research. Like, let's say I'm writing for an instrument or a group that I don't understand. Well, I still have to be a good student and listen to what's out there. Also, I should understand, and every artist should understand, who are you in conversation with, intentionally or not, right? I mean, like people are like, oh, it's all abstract, but let's say I never heard bump, ba-da-da-dum, bump, 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 and I wrote it in my piece, and then I'm like, well, I never heard that. You can't say that I'm writing this cartoony thing, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
my responsibility actually to understand what the cultural context of that is, right? Like that sort of cartoonish ending sound from Looney Tunes, right?
Right.
Yeah, I need to know what are other people doing in this art form, and what do I want to do that's different, and actually that's fun for me. So I set aside time for research, non-musical, musical research, and usually that'll be like 3 hours or something. And then I set aside time for play based composing, just sketching, not writing down. So I might write, and I'll usually do it in 30-second, 20 to 30-second chunks. So I might be like, today's June 16th. I might say, oh, June 17th, I'm going to write 30 seconds in the morning of my upcoming piece for, I'm working on Eighth Blackbird piece right now. My piece for Eighth Blackbird. Just piano voice memo. That's it, right? No written music. And then I'll make a job for myself to notate that music. So I'll put like 30 seconds, notate that 30 seconds into Sibelius. And then I'll usually have orchestration, like orchestrate those 30 seconds. And it doesn't go in order, like all play, all compose, all short score, all orchestration. It usually sort of cycles, like, okay, I'm going to work on this little island of information. I'll cycle through those different phases of it, and then I'll get there at the end, and I'll move on to the next cycle of phases. And this also includes, by the way, like part prep, score prep, proofreading. I'll leave time for proofing so that I'm not panicked at like 11 p.m. being like, oh God, like there's all these typos. I got to turn my piece in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'll leave a few days at the end where it's just like all day, Monday, June, whatever, proof that piece, print it off, and I'll type out to myself my instructions when I'm feeling sober and clear headed, right? Which is not true at like 11 p.m. when you're panicked trying to make a to-do list. Like Get it on your iPad, go to the coffee shop that you know you like, and sit there with headphones on silent and just get your pencil and like circle things that are colliding. That's what I'm going to do. That's my job for the day, and it's really helpful because I'll know if I'm on schedule. I'll know when I'm predicted to finish. Again, it always changes. I always have to fix it while I'm going. And being that meticulous has been important to me because now that I have a family, I have a 4-year-old, I have things to do around the house. I have permission to stop working at 5. I know what I can do by 5 p.m. and I can go pick up my kid from preschool. And I'm not like, oh God, you need to get to bed so I can keep working. Like I would have done, 10 years ago. Like I'm going to work till 2 a.m. on my computer. Like, I'm like, hey, I'm done for today. I don't feel guilty about it. I don't feel the urge to keep going. I mean, I do feel the urge to keep going, but I don't, I can enjoy dinner. Or I can like play with him.
Yeah, yeah.
And I didn't really start doing that until he was born because it was so necessary. I would have small little to-do lists, but it was very much just like write the first minute of the piece, write the second minute, write the third minute, and how I got there. It would take a few days or not. It was less organized, but now I'm really hyper focused on that. I don't know if it's like really boring. I'm not sure if I answered your question properly or not.
Well, it's not boring to me because I mean that's like I've talked about before how like my entire life revolves around like a notebook with like a planner, because I have I have the podcast, I have my radio job, I have like another radio job sometimes. I'm trying to compose too, by the way, and then of course there's like life itself, and you're right, like I've never been the type of composer to stay up all night, like just keep going and going and going until
I totally was.
whenever.
Yeah, I'd go till dawn.
but yeah, but still, I've noticed that there's probably a few years ago, like I would stay up until 10 p.m. like working on my computer on a piece of music, and then I couldn't fall asleep at night because my brain was too wired. And so I was like, okay, I can't work in the evenings anymore. So now I have to like be a little bit more judicious and organized about, when do I do this? So I totally relate to all of it. But something that you keep saying is like, it's kind of flexible. And that's how I've always described like any kind of planning or organizational tools that I create along with a piece of music is, this is like the blueprint to a house. But if I run into some issues with the ground or the foundation, or like this room is a little too small, I want it to be bigger, or vice versa, it's like I expect those changes to come up. This is just something to get me started and going, and keep me going.
Exactly. Yeah. And you just know what stage you're in. And even if I fall slightly behind, I feel pretty comforted by knowing where I am in the process. I can't just go anymore. Be like, oh, I'm writing a 10-minute piece for XYZ group. Here we go. I can't. I can't move on until I know what the structure is.
I know how easy it is to hear a mid-roll just like this one and tune out completely. I do it too. Actually, I even skip through them sometimes. But if you've been enjoying this episode and you're still with me here, this is a great moment to hit follow, leave a quick rating, or just tell a friend. All of those actions really do matter, and you can find links in the show notes, or you can visit looseleaftransmissions.com to do all of those things and more. So another one of the questions that I ask everybody who comes on the podcast is, what is a piece of music, a song, a film, a book, a piece of art, it could be an experience, any kind of artistic artifact that changed the way that you thought about your work, or even changed your life or creative life altogether?
Gosh.
And it doesn't have to be just one. It could be,
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Because I'm trying to narrow it to the things that matter most to me. Well, okay, I'm going to start with something that somebody that matters a lot to me, who I've never met, but the author Salman Rushdie is just one of my favorite authors of all time. And I read, and I just finished reading to my son, actually, his first like chapter book, Haroun and the Sea of Stories, which is a story that just like blew my mind. And the reason it blew my mind, around the same time I was deciding to become a composer, I've read it so many dozens of times. I've read everything that Salman Rushdie has written, by the way. It was so childlike and playful, and the stakes were so high. So Haroun and the Sea of Stories, do you know that story at all?
I do not know.
The synopsis is Haroun is a boy, and he his father's a storyteller in the sad city, and it's so sad. They eat glumfish and manufacture sadness in the sadness factories,
Yeah.
And he goes on this great adventure where he meets a water genie who has the story tap that his father subscribes to, and they travel to the moon Kahani, which is invisible to us, but it's where the story water comes from. And he has to like stop Katam Shud, the Dark Prince, from plugging up the ocean, basically polluting the ocean to stop stories from existing. Katam Shud is a person who hates stories and thinks that fun should be done away with because adulthood is suffering and seriousness. And it's amazing because the story is all about this kid like trying to deal with real life issues. Like it's sad. His mother leaves, right? His father loses the gift of gab and it's their livelihood. Everybody's sad. It's very much like the real world, right? Bad things happen. Like politicians are abusive to them, and then this water genie shows up, and he's just trying to save his dad, but he ends up having to save the whole story ocean to save his father, right? The stakes are hugely high. Like my son was like, he's 4, was like scared, like petrified. Like I had to read to him until 9:30 p.m. one night because I couldn't stop at a certain page because like the Prince of Darkness was like, poisoning the ocean. And I was like, okay, we'll pick up tomorrow. And he was like, no, he gets the stakes. And
Yeah.
realizing that like storytelling can be serious and you can be taken seriously, and you could use the innocence of like childhood and play to tell those serious issues was hugely influential for me. So Heard in the Sea of Stories was actually an opera. Charles Warren said it, which when I found that out, I was so sad. Not because Charles Warren said it, but because I wanted to set it one day.
Sure.
That was like my dream when I was 18 or 20, or more like 20 or 22. I was to be that. And I even wrote Salman Rushdie's like agent when I was like 22 years old, being like, one day I want to write this. I want to set an opera to this story. And she wrote back and was like, oh, Mr. Rushdie listened to the sample that you sent and said it sounded really nice, but let us know if you're ever in. And I was like, oh my God, Salman Rushdie heard my music, right? I completely lost it. I'm sure he did not, but that's okay. But hearing stories like that really, really affected me, and hit Salman Rushdie in particular as a huge influence to me. Musically, Gabrielle Anna Frank has been one of the biggest influences to me in my entire life. Prior to meeting her, I had never seen a composer do the thing of like telling stories, being influenced by things that were not conventionally done on the great concert stages. And to see someone as successful and as important as her, and also so warm and so approachable, was huge to me. And I've told her this before, like, I just kind of want to be her when I grow up. Yeah, like, yes, I am a full adult with a child. So, like I am kind of grown up, but like, I want to be like the kind of person who writes music that's like impactful to me, but also so intelligent and well-crafted. I saw her opera El Último Sueño de Frida de Diego 4 times. I love that work. I saw it twice in San Diego and twice in LA. And I studied her string quartet, Quixotadas, about like Don Quixote, scenes from Don Quixote.
It's a great piece.
I love that piece. And I analyzed it in the dumbest ways possible with like nexus set theory and like all the doctoral stuff you're supposed to. And I showed it to her and she was like, if you say so,
Right.
I was like, look, but the shape you made in the first movement, and then you like turn it upside down, and then you extended it, and you totally did this collection of pitch class sets where she was like, I was just writing, and I knew she was going to tell me that, but I was so excited to show her how much I had studied it. It was also inspirational to me to be like, okay, actually, if you study hard, that's not a wasted effort. It becomes part of you. And then when you play, your subconscious, trusting your subconscious, it all comes out. Like, she's studied really hard. And all of her music is so well crafted because she trusts her instincts after having committed herself so deeply. That was hugely influential to me. I'm trying to think of something else. Like, I wish I had more time to watch movies. I really do. Some movies have left huge impressions on me. I really, really like a movie by Greg Nava called Mi Familia. It's just like, it takes place in like LA, and it's about this like immigrant family, like this Mexican American family. And it's not his most famous movie. His most famous movie is Selena, which he wrote. Yeah, of course. Yeah, made Jennifer Lopez's career. Fun fact, in Mi Familia, Jennifer Lopez is in it. She's the immigrant mom. You can just see snippets of her, like they go back in time to like see her crossing the border. It's J-Lo, which is so funny in a modern context, right? Like holding a baby, like looking really young, I think he met her through that project. But I like love the storytelling in it. Like Edward James Olmos is in it, who's just an icon. Like the portrayal of characters, like living their lives, like seeing people who come from a culture that's like mine, not have to always be like the downtrodden victims or criminals or others, just the centers of the story. That was just like huge for me. So I don't know, it's three different things like music, movies, and books. But those are the three that come to mind right now as really changing the way I felt about how I wanted to write music and how I wanted to approach art making.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that we haven't got a chance to talk about yet, that I actually did not prepare to talk about, though it probably warrants its own episode, is your work in opera, which you've touched on. And I'm sure that everything you just described, influences the way you approach opera writing. I mean, I guess how can it not?
Yeah, no, totally. Opera writing is so different than anything else, right? And I'm lucky to do a lot of it now. Opera writing, you are so much more of a piece of a larger project. And like that's true of everything. Like if you write an orchestra piece, you're collaborating with the performers and the conductor and like things change, right? But in opera, you're really accountable to so many different moving parts. You're accountable to the general director, you're accountable to the librettist first and foremost, right?
Right.
And I'm lucky to have worked with a few really good librettists, Morella Martin Cook and Laura Barati, namely. You're accountable to the choreographer, you're accountable to the director, you're accountable to the singers who are giving you feedback. The amount of rewrites and revisions has been so sobering for me, and it's made me less precious about things. Like really, really made me realize like what I want to fight for, how intentional I want to be about a certain choice. And yes, even like ridiculous choices that seem faux pas to talk about as a composer, like, oh, is it worth it to write the hardest music possible for this transition when it's going to eat up 10 minutes of rehearsal time? Or could I do that transition with 5 minutes of rehearsal time? Could I make it a bit more readable so that I could get to the song that I actually care about? That's different than an orchestra piece or a chamber music piece where I'm really like, yeah, sure, do this crazy quadruple stop and like, yeah, end on a harmonic and like slide it up and then do a little like circular bow and then fall back down. Like I would
Right,
never,
right.
I don't do that in the opera, right? Because I'm really trying to be part of the team to get this going. And my operas are still, I say this knowing full well that anybody who would listen to this who has sung my opera knows that my operas are really hard. So I'm not
Yeah.
here writing like easy stuff. I had two sopranos once who met each other on a gig. They were both singing at a bigger opera house, and they were chatting. And they both realized that they knew me, and I was in New York, and I got lunch with each of them separately, and each of them told me separately, "Oh yeah," and I totally talked to this person, and she said, "Yeah, God, like." That was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my entire life to like memorize it. She's like, you memorized yours? I got to sing mine from a stand. Like, oh my God, I could never, like,
Yeah.
and so I know that I have that reputation a little bit, even though my music's like tonal and has structure, but really, really working hard to understand what it's going to take to put on my music has been a direct result of working on opera, of really thinking about not just the end result, but the rehearsal process and like,
Oh, yeah.
what can I do knowing I have limited time? And like the orchestra world's like that too, right? I mean, I had like 30 minutes, 20 minutes total of rehearsal time with the New York Phil before my piece happened. I'm sure the LA Phil is going to be the exact same coming up, right? So it can be hard. They're amazing, but it has to be rehearsable. And those are a little different. Hard but rehearsable is it's difficult to gauge that properly. And I'm getting better at it, but I'm not saying I'm the best at it still. But I'm open to getting better at it.
Totally. I mean, on that note, something that you shared with me prior to our conversation today is about how important it is to work with trusted colleagues and performers, people who will give you honest feedback with the piece's best interests at heart. How has having those kinds of collaborators changed the way that you approach the writing itself?
Uh, I mean, being accountable, being responsible for a project and for somebody's success is an amazing gift, right? That's part of growing up is realizing that you are relying on me for something and I'm relying on you for something, and it's a two-way street. And that could come from like you could be working in retail, or you could be a business owner, or you could be an artist. That's true no matter what you do. It's part of growing in your career. And that's been like when I'm responsible for somebody else and I'm asking them to do something that is difficult, and them feeling responsible for me is like the most gratifying stage of the rehearsal process.
Yeah.
Sitting there and being like, can you like I know like I wrote this like in my for example in my Neruda songs for strings, oboe, and tenor that just premiered this spring and is going to come to the LA Phil again this coming year. I wrote just a couple of spots. I didn't have a chance to rehearse with the strings. Los Angeles fires happened. And so I missed out on a bunch of workshopping opportunities. I still left in the score a few triple and quadruple stops that I was like, I don't think this is possible. But I'm gonna leave it in here and I'm gonna ask, right? I'm gonna leave time in the rehearsal process, even though it's short, to ask them, like, hey, I know you probably rehearsed this, it's dumb, but like, can you talk to me about this moment?
Yeah.
And being able to work with the player in the room and her being like, no, it's not possible. Actually, hold on a sec. If I swap these, I could do it like this. How do you think of that? And sometimes I'll be like, yeah, actually, let's keep that. Thank you for that solution. I'll re-notate it to clarify which string has to do which pitch. And it's counterintuitive. Like, one string is higher than the other, but it's on a lower string, right? And sometimes they'll do it, they'll try, and I'll be like, you know what, that sounds really meek and frail. Um, let's just omit that pitch so that it's an easier chord shape after all. That's where the pieces become great, and not great that I'm saying I write great music, just great experiences to work on, great memorable times in my life where I am like, oh man, that was so fun to figure that out. And then I saw them do it on stage and I thought they did a great job. That's so satisfying. I haven't written a piece in abstract in like over a decade, like just written a piece to write a piece. And I'm not saying I've gotten paid for all those pieces, right? Sometimes it's just a friend. Like actually last week I did this. A friend asked me to write 20 seconds of music for this like Instagram Reels video with like Dolores Gomez, who's this like Mexican influencer. She's like an older woman who like gives consejos and sabidorias, like advice. And my friend was like, oh, she asked me if I could sing some of her advice, but I want a composer to do it. Could you like, do you think you could just write a couple of melodies for me? I'll send you the advice that she said, the consejos. And like, of course I said yes. I really like this soprano. We've worked together in the past. I know that influencer. I was like, that seems like a fun thing to do. I don't know what it'll end up being for me, but I just like the soprano. So I wanted to write for her and I did. And it was fun. She got to record them. It was just posted over the weekend and she sounded really good. And again, I wrote for somebody, even though it was not like an official quote project, right? I'm really lucky that I get to write for projects overall now today. But even 15 years ago, I would only write a piece. I realized I would only write a good piece if I had somebody in mind, like a violist, and I was like, hey, if I write you this piece, will you promise to perform it? Can we trade? Can we trade experience and opportunity? Or if I write you this art song, will you promise to rehearse it with me and like help me figure out how to write for soprano better? Those pieces ended up being my favorite pieces. And usually the pieces that I retract, to be honest, are the pieces that I wrote in abstract. Either it was for nobody and I had it performed, or it was for somebody, but I never workshopped it with them.
Yeah.
And then we premiered it, and it was like, some things were salvageable, but not all of it. Those are usually the pieces that I end up retracting or pulling back after a while.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I do think I do actually. I would go as far to say that getting a chance to work with someone one on one on a piece and getting their feedback and like changing things in real time sometimes,
Yeah.
it does like elevate the music. It makes me a better composer. And yeah, I think that's like the bread and butter of why we do it.
Yeah, I know. It's a weird profession, right? You're so by yourself for so long. And then you got to be like really social and active and turned on and ready to go with things, right? Especially with confinements of like union specified breaks. You can't sit there and wax poetic when you're in an orchestra rehearsal and say, "Well, wouldn't it be beautiful if the moon was represented by?" Like, no, you got to tell them what to do in the moment, and you got to triage your thoughts and then take notes and come back later. Like in an opera, in my opera rehearsals and workshops, I have pencil and paper, my laptop with an Excel spreadsheet and Sibelius open just in case I need to jump to a measure. There's like 3,500 measures, right?
Right.
Because I need to answer somebody else's question, and an iPad with the score open at the same time. And I'm constantly taking notes, and my Excel spreadsheet has measured numbers and priority. So if I hear something, I always assume it's my fault first as a default. If something goes off, what can I control? It's the composition, right? I assume it's my fault. Like the singer ran out of breath. The violinist played the wrong note. Like, what did I do to set that situation up incorrectly? And if it's not my fault, and fault isn't the right word, or just my issue that I can resolve, I move down to like, is it the performer's thing to resolve? Like maybe they didn't take a breath where they should have, and we'll ask. And it might be simple as that. Or do I need to rewrite this entire section because she couldn't take a breath where I needed her to? And what's more important to me, is it that she holds this long note at the climax for a full three measures, or is it that the previous like run up jamming of words feels breathless and exciting, right? And can I cut off a measure or can I give her a breath? How can I solve this issue for her to help her? And that process has worked really well for me. Assuming it's my fault first, figuring out what I can do to fix it, and then looking from that point on to who else can help me fix this issue, because it's just what's in my immediate control. But I can't bring up all those notes at once. So I have an Excel spreadsheet, and
Yeah,
then
right.
during post rehearsal with the conductor or the director or the librettist, I'm like, okay, we can go over the 200 things that I typed out now and check them off as resolvable. The conductor says, I'll fix that tomorrow. Easy. Checked off the box. Moving on. I'll make sure this is faster, slower. I'll help her hold it longer, etc. That's exciting. I love that. It's like the thrill of the hunt. I love being in the room, listening to every little minutiae, every little detail. It's very fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. So we are nearing the end here, but I wanted to make sure I brought this up, and it's something that I've picked up on. It's not necessarily music related, so that's how you know we're nearing the end here.
Okay.
Something I picked up from following you online, which is that you seem pretty serious about gardening,
Yes.
and I even saw recently that you were giving away tomatoes to friends, which, funny enough, is something that my wife and I love doing too. Mostly Susanna, I'm like the benefactor to her green thumb, and I haul her plants around and whatever when we need to. So, what does gardening mean to your life and your creative work? If there is a connection at all, I mean, do you feel like there is between gardening and composing, or do you think of them as like totally separate activities?
I think there is a connection, but I also think it's like a betterment of my life. I'm not saying that everybody needs to garden, but it does a few things for me directly and then also indirectly. Like for me directly, it will calms my mind. I compose here in my studio here in Long Beach, which is just in my backyard. And then if I'm so stuck that I cannot move on, I can't compose, I can't improvise, I can't notate, I'm frustrated, I'll just go prune the tomatoes for like 15 minutes. I'll pick off the suckers, I'll pick the ones that are ripe, I'll clean up the soil, I'll fertilize something. And it really, like, I get away from my phone, away from screens. It really just, in very little time, calms me down very quickly. And I feel like I'm ready for another round and I can jump back in.
Yeah.
There's those immediate benefits. It's also taught me a lot about like planning ahead. I think in terms of plants all the time. Like when I first planted, so I have raised beds. I do vegetable gardening, which I love to do, and I have fruit trees and everything. So lucky to live where I live, and I can do this all year round. And then I have like 100+ native species from California in the front and side yard that I tend to. And those have taken a lot longer. Vegetable gardening is very fun because in a month you can have a zucchini, right? Your cherry tomatoes are popping out after a month or two, right? It's just like immediate satisfaction. My native plant garden, though, I planted knowing that it was going to take 2 to 3 years to really grow in. And going out there and just looking at it, and it doesn't look any different. Really learning to think about patience and spacing. Composing is not so different. Sometimes for a long-term project, like my opera took 4 or 5 years to write, right? If you get so stuck on like this individual song has got to be the greatest song of all time, you kind of lose sight of the forest by being stuck in the trees of like this song has to fit in 45 minutes into the opera to really tell us about this character. And this song is not worth anything without going back in time and thinking about where did this character come from, or where is this character going? Can I plant a seed? And actually, in my opera planning, for example, I did not write it linearly. I wrote it very much out of order because I decided this duet is a precursor to the trio that happens an hour later, right? These
Yeah.
things are parallel. So I can't write the duet unless I write the finale trio. I know where we're going and I can unpack it and reverse engineer it, or vice versa, right? Or these two arias are connected. This one she's insecure and this one she's found herself. So I need to write them side by side so they almost feel like they're sisters. They could go together, but they need to actually be different. Or I cannot write this politician's aria unless I write the other politician's aria, right? So it was all completely out of order. And same thing with planting my native plant garden. I realized like certain species need shade. So I needed to plant one ahead of time so it could create a small canopy in the hot side yard. So the smaller plant can grow underneath it, right? Or this plant grows fast and this one grows slow. So I could pair them up. I could plant this fast growing bush sunflower with a slower growing buckwheat. but sunflower will sort of burn up, bloom for 3 seasons, and then die back. And by then, the buckwheat will be taking over the space, right? Also, not all ideas work out, right? I've killed probably 50 plus plants at no small expense, right? Including very, very rare species that I cherished deeply. I put in the ground exactly where I was told to, put the right soil amendments, and they died. And dealing with like that disappointment of it hung on for 6 months, I could have planted something else that was easier. And realizing that precious being precious like that with my music is also the same. Like I have to let certain ideas go, even if they've been on the vine for a while. I have to
Yeah.
say, this didn't pan out. I was working on this moment, and it's not it. I might have to restart this piece. A lot of patience, a lot of just like taking the long view. Gardening has really helped me do, and also just sharing joy. Like community has been really great. Surprisingly, like sharing my vegetables is one of my great joys. This time of year, I show up with tomatoes all the time. If you invite me to hang out, I'll probably bring a small Tupperware of cherry tomatoes to share with
Right.
you because I have
That's
too many.
us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, we end up swimming in them.
Yes, I have
Typically.
so many. I can't pick them fast enough right now.
Yeah.
But not even just that. Like my kid eats so many vegetables because of it. And then even in the front yard, when I first moved to where I live now in Long Beach, I didn't know any of my neighbors, and I did it all myself. I dug every hole in the front yard for every new native plant I planted, right? And all my neighbors would come swinging by. Like they would come over. One of them would bring me like sparkling water. Be like, hey, here you look like it's a hot day. Here's a drink. Hey, what are you up to? My name's so and so. Like I would just meet my neighbors that way. And I know my entire block now. People from a few houses down would walk over and say hi to me as I was digging in the front yard, covered in dirt, smelly. And I got to explain to them, like, oh, yeah, I got a city rebate, which is why I'm affording to do this. And you should try it. And they'd be like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I'll explore native plants. I'll come ask you about it sometime. Watching some of my neighbors' yards transform. Different, not all native plants, but different low water things and ideas. It's been just super fun. I know the nursery owners. It feels like getting to know conductors and orchestras.
Right. Right.
Like I get to go for them for expertise and advice. So it parallels my life greatly. I think everybody obviously should have a hobby that's not their primary job, that is an outlet that you can be bad at and enjoy being bad at. I know I seem successful at gardening on Instagram. It is not the case. I kill so many things constantly, but I don't really mind. The stakes are lower. It's okay if one tomato gets curly top leaf virus or whatever, and I have to pull it out. I'll grow another one. It's no skin off my back.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. You and Susanna will have a lot to talk about one day
Yeah,
about
I,
this.
I hope we can hang out. If you guys come out in this summer, if I'm not in Oakland for my opera, swing by. I'll give you guys tomatoes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not
We
that
would
you need
love.
them.
We can't. I guess we could take them on the plane, but
Yeah.
yeah, local tomatoes would be fun. Yeah, we also have a native garden. Again, all Susanna. I just help dig the holes and carry plants around. But the zoo here in Cincinnati, where we live, will give you like a plaque if you plant like a certain threshold of native plants at your home. And so I
Wow.
think she's been working on that, like curating, and I've watched her like draw diagrams and like she's like, okay, I gotta go get this plant because it's this color, but like it'll attract these species of insects. And
Oh
so yeah,
yeah, no,
so
yeah.
yeah, it's
Oh,
like
and the mistakes I've made, like overcrowding things that have gotten too big, and I'm
yeah.
like, why is that next to the house? Oh my god, it's like 6 feet tall now. Like this was supposed to be 3 feet tall, but I guess it's really happy here, so I should thank my lucky stars that it likes
Yeah.
this location.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I'm tangentially in it all. So
Yeah, tell Susanna to reach out anytime. I'd love to talk about plants and gardens.
yeah, yeah, I'll let her know. So getting into my final series of questions, just a fun way to tie things up, and these are questions that I ask everyone. So it's always interesting to see the way people respond similarly or differently than one another. Starting off with, what do you think you would be doing artistically or otherwise if it wasn't composing? And I think I have an idea of how you might answer.
I don't know. I'm starting to think I might like to be like a botanist or something.
Yeah,
I actually I do love plants. I love gardening. I wonder if I would enjoy being like a field botanist or someone who understands that better. And I want to get certified one day, but that's not my professional outlook.
sure.
Yeah, but I would love to know plants even better.
Yeah. What are you trying to get better at in your creative life right now?
I'm always trying to get better at time management still. And I know I spent so much time talking about how obsessed I was, how many charts I make, how I divide my time up. And it's true. Like I maybe am already more obsessed than most, but it's because I feel so bad at it. I think everybody's chasing the goal of just creating and writing, and it's all creating a scenario for me of making it habit and not waiting for inspiration. That's always a struggle for me. And honestly, like I found that the best way to be motivated is to go to other concerts.
Mm,
Um, I love going to concerts. I don't think one could be a composer if you didn't love going to concerts. If you didn't love hearing things worth talking about, right? I love going to concerts where I don't even like the music that much. I mean, I don't intentionally do that, but that's okay. Like it's part of my life and my job. It doesn't mean I'm uninterested. I might go to a brand new piece and be like, man, that like really rocked in this regard. I would never write that kind of music, but that was killer. And even if the piece is nothing like what I'm working on, I find I'm in the mood to write the next day. It's like putting logs on the creative fire. That part's been harder with a kid to go to any concert I ever want to. But sometimes when my wife says she'll watch Lalo for the afternoon, I'll double up. It's not uncommon for me to go to like a matinee at the LA Phil and then across the street go to the opera that evening. I've actually done that before
yeah, yeah.
because I'm like, she says she's got him for the day, so I'm going to go to both things, and see. There was one day where there was two new pieces, and I was like, I got to go to both two premieres. I got to see them both, so I'll do that. And it's not even big stuff. I'll go to like that's happened before, and then a few months ago, I went to a new piece like the Chamber Series at the LA Phil, and then I went to like a small, like very scrappy, like garage show of new music across LA. I had to drive like 45 minutes even,
Oh,
but
yeah.
but I love going to concerts. I love hearing music. So
Is there a tool that you use in your practice that you think everyone should know about and that everyone else could benefit from? And this could be like a physical tool, it could be a software, it could be a process, even just anything that you feel people could benefit from.
okay, so I mean, a tool that's super important to me that is often overlooked is just voice memos. And not voice memos in the conventional sense. I think a lot of people treat voice memos like a recording device where you're like, here's my melody, I'm going to record it. Sometimes I'll use voice memos where I'll be walking and I'll be like, oh my god, okay, I'll just a voice note almost like, okay, what about a piece where there's nothing but whole notes and all the whole notes all move together in parallel, and in the B section they all move in different directions, you know, and then they all move in parallel again. And yeah, like that's kind of incoherent and silly, but I'll know what I'm talking about later. The
Yeah.
the idea of it. It's too slow to type it out with my thumbs on my iPhone, right? And I'll write like piece idea, like number 80, and I'll just go through those when I'm in a break. Voice memos I love deeply, deeply. I have hundreds and hundreds of them, and I like that they're a garbage heap of whatever. Like I like that I'm very organized with everything else. Like I love a clean desk. I love my trash can on my desktop is always empty. It kills me if it's not emptied or my downloads folder is not emptied, right? Has to be sorted. I'm an inbox zero kind of guy, but having places where it can be a garbage dump and I don't care is helpful. So my notes, never delete them. They're always crazy. It stresses me out a little bit, but it's confined, you know.
Yeah. I have created like buckets where I can, yes, like type stuff out as they pop into my brain, but I haven't tried voice memos yet, so I might have to do that.
Yeah.
So my final question is, what is something that you've never had a chance to say about your art that you've always wanted to share with people?
I think when it comes to my art and what I want people to know about it is that I said it a little earlier, but just to reinforce, I really come at it from a place of I assume I'm one of the biggest idiots in the room. Always, always. I know when a piece is done and the score is complete and it's double barred and it's on stage and there's a premiere happening, that it just seems like this is me bestowing upon everybody or any composer really like this. These are the things that I know and that you should know about. And it's really the opening of a conversation, like writing a piece about irrigation. Like I don't know all about irrigation. I'm not an expert in that. I was just inspired. Like I've had people who are like, oh, I know a lot about water rights. I'd love to talk to you about it sometime. And I appreciate that very much. Or when I wrote a piece with Morella Tres Minutos, an opera about the border crisis, I am not full of answers about what immigration and the border crisis means with the US-Mexico border, right? All I know is the story that we told about siblings and dreamers being deported. And I was lucky enough last fall to be on a panel with the president of the Border Angels, a group in Tijuana, who the story is loosely based on, who reunites families, right? And they were like, you must know about XYZ, you must know about all of this stuff. And I just like really don't all the time, right? I have this huge feeling of like, I just don't know a lot. And maybe that comes from when I started writing quote, classical music. Like I just didn't know the quote, canonical composers. I don't mind not knowing things very much. I don't want to say that I come from a place of ignorance and I want to just blurt out whatever comes to mind, but I don't mind being challenged on not knowing something almost ever. And I really hope that feeling never goes away. I'm not saying that I like not knowing things. It's certainly not fun to have somebody come up to you and be like, well, you said that you put a bird call in this piece, but actually that's you put the bird call of the XYZ bird, not the one. I'm like, damn it, I wrote the wrong bird call, like that's not a great feeling, but I don't mind. And I want people to know when they approach me after a piece, I don't think that I know everything about that piece. And I'm always being surprised by it. And my collaborators, they always teach me about whatever I'm writing too. The tenor who sang the Neruda songs for the premiere, he was like, God, I love what you did with sixth in this piece. I noticed that every song has a descending sixth representing, the sort of descent into like sanity of the person who's doubting themselves. And then at the very last song, you ascend a sixth. It's all about ascent of sixth. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I so appreciate you finding this pattern. And he like had this whole like little paragraph typed out to me about how much research he had done into my piece and how he noticed this. And he was grateful that I had made this pattern. And I was like, I really did not on purpose. I'm so glad you organized my piece though. Like, I feel like the biggest dummy in the room most of the time, but I feel like that's offset by being with really smart collaborators, really smart audiences, really smart interpreters. Right. And so I just want people to know I feel this way constantly. I'm constantly feeling like I don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm just doing my damnedest to know a bit more with each passing piece.
Yeah, I feel that way too. So you're not alone.
Yeah.
Well, Nicolás, this has been a ton of fun. It has flown by, and like I said a few moments ago, I feel like we'll be due to do this again sometime in the future. But for now, I think that's a beautiful place to cap things off. And I just want to say how much I appreciate your time today. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you. And I hope to talk to you again soon. If you're in Oakland this summer for the opera premiere of Dolores, like let me know. I would love to get you tickets. Love to have you.
Yeah, I will let you know. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tyler.
Much gratitude to you, Nicolás, for your openness and clarity. And I just really appreciate the way that he shared not just what he's working on, but how he thinks about his role as a composer in the larger artistic and cultural landscape. You can find out more about Nicolás Lell Benavides and his work, including updates on his opera Dolores and upcoming premieres, by visiting his website. That's nicolasbenavides.com. I'll include a link to that in the show notes. I'm Tyler Kline, and thanks for spending part of your day here on Music Maker. The show is produced by Loose Leaf Transmissions, made for all ears. And you can explore more episodes and find ways to support the podcast at looseleaftransmissions.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you here again next time.